Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. You're watching TechStrong TV, and today is Thursday, June 25th. Happy Thursday to you. Getting towards the end of yet another week as we move head first into summer. I hope wherever you're watching this from, you're safe and well and figuring out how you might enjoy this summer in the outdoors under the unique circumstances that we find ourselves in. Not going to dwell on that a lot today, though. I know a lot of people, though, besides making whatever vacation plans they can, are also really knee-deep or hip-deep or head-deep into work-related activities. You know, the tech industry just continues to chug along. And we've got a lot of great news to go over with you today and some great interviews I think you're really going to enjoy. Got a bunch of stuff for today. Let me tell you what we have in store for today, actually. Number one, I don't know if you're familiar with the company Gremlin. They've been around a couple of years now. They're really one of the pioneers in what's become to known as the chaos engineering space, right? We've interviewed our friend James Wickett and Casey from Verica, and Gremlin is another player in that chaos engineering space. They've been around a while. And I'm happy we caught up with Matt Schillerstrom, who's a product manager at Gremlin. They've recently released some new features and capabilities. It's chaos engineering as a service kind of thing. And it's actually pretty cool. So I think you're going to want to listen in on what Matt has to say there. And then after the commercial break after that, we're going to be back with my friend Shlomi Ben-Chaim. So Shlomi, if you've ever met Shlomi, just one of the nicest fellas I've met in the DevOps, in the technology space. You know, very smart. He leads a unicorn company, but you wouldn't know it from talking to him. He's proud of what they've done at JFrog, but if you look at the culture he's built there, to me it epitomizes what culture is about in a startup and in the DevOps world and everything else. The Swamp Up, the JFrog user conference is, of course, virtual this year, and it's going on this week. Well, started, I think, Wednesday, and it wraps up today. There might have been a training day Tuesday. I'm not sure, but if you go to JFrog Swamp Up, you can get the schedule. And from what Shlomi tells us, I believe many of the sessions, workshops, etc., will be available even after the fact if you can't get there live. But they made a number of announcements at Swamp Up this week. And so Shlomi's going to share them with us. Two things I want you to think about: edge ops and bin ops, right? Those are two kind of new terms that JFrog's introducing to the mix, right? Recognizing the power of the edge, so for edge ops, and bin ops. I think, you know, what we're seeing with JFrog is they continue to move beyond, let's just say, Artifactory. I mean, they've made enhancements to JFrog pipelines. Just, you know, this is a picture of a company firing on all cylinders right now. And it was good to catch up with Shlomi. I think you'll enjoy our conversation with him. And that'll be probably about 30 minutes into the show. You'll be able to see that one. Then after Shlomi, I'm happy to also speak with another industry veteran who's very well known, David Cole. David, of course, was with Tenable. He was with a couple of other well-known security companies over the last 15, 20 years, maybe more. David and our friend Mark Curfey, the founder of OWASP, have started a new company called OpenRaven. It's just come out of stealth, very well funded by some blue chip VCs, open source model. It checks all the boxes for what a successful startup today in the security, DevSec, AppSec space should be. And we're going to talk to David. He's going to tell us about OpenRaven, why they did it, and where they're going. So that's another great interview I really, really recommend. Then we're going to pull something out of the archives for something old. And again, we'll be going into our TechStrong Con archive of just a few weeks ago. And I'm happy to bring to you a session by Patrick O'Neill of FedEx on cloud automated governance. And I think you're going to like what Patrick presented on. It was one of the most commented on and liked sessions at TechStrong Con. So check out Patrick's presentation there. And then I'll be back with the news, as usual, headlines from around the sites. And then we'll head over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor. Charlene has a couple of good pieces today. One is with David Brimley, Chief Product Officer at Hazelcast. And it's an introduction to in-memory computing and its benefits in digital transformation. I think you'll enjoy that. I think Charlene also may have some webinar previews for us today for some of the great webinars coming up next week, early next week here on Media Ops. And then we're going to head over to Mitch, where we have an analyst corner with Mitch. And we have a DevOps mainframe. Well, Mitchell's going to be doing in addition to a commentary, an interview he did, DevOps mainframes in the economic rebound, with our friend Rosalind Radcliffe from IBM, of course. And then we're going to head over to Mike Vizard, and Mike actually has a good interview up today with R.J. Jahindra, Vice President and General Manager of DevOps and Business Management at ServiceNow. And ServiceNow is making a big move into the DevOps space, and so good stuff coming. And they just recently made an acquisition as well. Mike's going to have all that info, so stay tuned for that. And then I'll be back to close things up. Sounds like it's an action-packed filled TechStrong TV episode today for Thursday, June 25th. We're going to take a commercial right now, and we'll be right back with our next guest.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to protect yourself and others from spreading the virus. Prevention and personal safety is key. Here are the top ways you can protect yourself and others. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice social distancing and avoid high-risk potential people. If you are showing symptoms, stay at home. If you must go out, wear a face mask. Always cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue or use the inside of your elbow. Clean and sanitize frequently touched surfaces daily. Together, we can prevent this pandemic.
Hey everyone. Okay, let's head over now to our first interview for today. As I mentioned at the top of the show, we're joined by Matt Schillerstrom, who's a project manager at Gremlin. You know, the whole chaos engineering thing is just a great case study in how a segment kind of defines itself. Of course, a lot of what we see in chaos engineering was pioneered by the folks at Netflix, with the advent of Chaos Monkey and many of the other programs they actually wrote and installed and used at Netflix. And out of that, we've seen this chaos engineering type of product and now service, or chaos engineering as a service, kind of filter its way through the marketplace. Gremlin's one of the leaders in this, and they do chaos engineering as a service. They recently introduced some significant upgrades to the service with more feature set. So we did catch up with Matt Schillerstrom, who was a Gremlin customer before he joined Gremlin, and sometimes those are the best people to bring on. And Matt's going to tell us all about the new features, some other stuff coming up in the roadmap, as well as just talk about where chaos engineering is today and why it's important to you. So let's now go to our interview with Matt Schillerstrom of Gremlin.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to our next segment here on TechStrong TV. My guest for this segment is Matt Schillerstrom. Matt is with Gremlin. Hey Matt, how are you, man?
Doing well, man. How are you?
I'm good. So Matt, I'm going to guess that a lot of our audience, and so Matt, right? Our audience is DevOps folks, cloud native kind of people, cyber, digital transformation, kind of the four, overlapping circles of our audience. They probably I don't know if a lot of them know who Gremlin is, frankly. So why don't we jump in there and tell us a little bit about Gremlin and a little bit about you?
Yeah, so first, thanks for letting me be on this show. I appreciate it a lot. Um, Gremlin is the world's first hosted chaos engineering service with a mission to help build a more reliable internet. Right. So we turn failure into resilience by offering engineers a fully hosted solution to safely experiment on those complex systems. So we're not only helping build a better application, better service, but we're also helping build better teams too by collaborating together on learning about their system. So,
Very cool. Very cool. So I think a lot of us have heard of the term chaos engineering. And I think a lot of, especially my DevOps.com audience, because I know what we've covered in the past, a lot of us think, chaos engineering kind of originated out of the Netflix tribe, if you will, with things like Chaos Monkey and similar sort of exercises that they were doing. And they were doing it live in production systems, right? And which is, when you think about it, kind of walking on the high wire without a net.
yeah,
But
great.
well, I guess it makes it it makes it real. But
Yep.
it sounds to me like one of the great things Gremlin does is it allows you to have that same, chaos experience, if you will, without maybe having to do it on a live system for all the world to see your mishaps, if you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, and let me explain a little bit about who I am and where I came
Sure.
from. Help answer that question. So I'm a product manager at Gremlin. I'll be here 5 months as of tomorrow. Before that, I actually worked at Target. I was a lead engineer and a product owner on the resiliency engineering enablement team. And
Okay.
we actually used Gremlin since 2017. So I was a customer that turned into an employee.
Those are often the best employees, man.
Yeah, yeah. But for Target, where I was working, what sold us on Gremlin 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, in fact, was really just that safety feature of running, Gremlin, the product on the platform in our staging environment, or leaning towards production and having like this halt button, this big red button in the corner of the UI, where I can just hit halt and safely return my system to normal, right? So that's what Gremlin gives today, is that safety and security and reliability. So
Absolutely. When we look from the time chaos engineering first became a thing, right? That people started recognizing, as I said, into the Netflix. It's not that long ago, right? It's not, and so it is still a rapidly maturing kind of space, within DevOps and everything else. And the idea that we now have a hosted version of it, right? With a thing like Gremlin really, I think, speaks to the maturity of it a little bit. But I can't help but think, especially you, right? You're coming as a customer who lived that life. Now you're here in product management of it. Your head's got to be exploding with, hey man, we got to be able to do this, and these are other things we want to build in there. Let's talk about what's possible and available or coming right now. Then we can talk longer term. What do you think are some of the cutting edge things that Gremlin is introducing now that's pretty cool?
yeah, so thanks for asking that question. As a product manager, coming from Target into Gremlin, I was excited to build my own first features with my amazing team and coworkers. And right now, one of the features that we're launching here is called status checks. So what that feature does is it's basically a safety feature. So when you run your first chaos experiment, you're not only just trying to attack your system, you're trying to learn and ask, is my system doing the right thing? So rather than having like this halt button that you have to press, we're creating this like auto halt button. So before you run an attack, you can ask your system, is my system in a steady state? Mm-hmm. And if it is, then run the experiment. Oftentimes, like when you're talking about an experiment, there's 3 things that you're always thinking about. What's the steady state? What are my abort conditions? And what does success look like, right? And then you sprinkle in the attacks in between those. And that's really what the status checks do, is before an attack and after attack, you can ask your system, am I ready? Did my system respond? Did it return to normal? Should I auto halt my experiment? That safety is really there with status checks that we're implementing.
Very cool. Excellent, man. So is this available now, Matt, or coming?
Yeah, so the official marketing launch is June 23rd.
This week.
Right next week. Yeah. So yeah, this is where we're getting it out there. We're excited. We've been, as a prior customer of Gremlin, we were always asking, like, what can we do to make this safer and more easy to onboard new teams? At Target, we had thousands of engineers, and when we were cascading this message of chaos engineering, folks are always kind of scared of hitting that, attack, unleash Gremlin button. It's just their first time, It's sort of like a roller coaster. When you're going up a roller coaster, you're always nervous, but then once you start going down, you're like, okay, I'm going to do this again. And really that status check, gives everybody that safety of knowing that this experiment's going to run in a system that's ready for chaos and not introduce even more chaos on top of an unstable system.
So it gives them that security blanket, if you will.
Yeah.
But you know what, Matt? I wonder, and being a user of the product in the past, you probably would be a great person to ask this. It's kind of like going into the casino and knowing that, hey, man, if I don't get 21 every hand, I get hit the button and they're not going to take my money. Does having that security blanket of a status check sort of take away, not the adrenaline rush, because that immaterial, but take away from the experience that the chaos engineering, kind of fosters in forcing you to think about, being resilient and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say it doesn't, right? When we were running these game days at Target, right? So these are events where you're collaborating as a team, you're around a table or now remotely, and you're trying to just break your system, learn about things so you can fix it. There was so much manual effort before running an attack. Like, you're looking at steady state, the load, you're making sure, like, your system is ready. And then when you're actually running the attack, you have so much, like, I use the term eyes on glass, right? Like, you have 5 engineers looking at all these monitoring and dashboards to see what's happening and behaving. And it's almost distracting you from learning, right? Because you're just waiting and looking at things. So really, like, the status check takes all those manual effort and work and automates it so you can focus on that chaos experiment and really learn through that.
Cool. One of the things we've seen in the kind of DevOps world, right, for the last 6-7 years is, and it's to a certain extent, even in cloud native, is that a lot of companies look at new innovation, new technology, new ways of looking at stuff and say, oh yeah, that's great for the unicorns. That's right. That's great for Netflix. That's great for Google or Facebook. Maybe even that's great for Target, right? Because they're huge and they've spent a ton of money on DevOps. They're doing dojos and all of that, right?
Yeah.
But that's not us. That's not us. We're old school. We're manufacturing. We're finance. We're healthcare. We're old school government. And, that chaos engineering sounds pretty cool, but we're not a unicorn. Who are, is that true? Is chaos engineering something for unicorns? All cloud, all companies, you have to be all cloud to use it? Or, what's the applicability to, quote unquote old schools or horses rather than unicorns?
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. So I actually co-host the Twin Cities Chaos Engineering meetup here in town.
Oh, very cool.
We have a wide variety of folks that attend, from small companies to large companies like Target, right? And yeah, chaos engineering is for sure for those enterprise-wide companies. They need to, right? Like, that's the competitive advantage for retailers too, especially, right? But definitely, like, small companies, like, they can easily run applications in the cloud today at low cost. And the question is, like, how are they learning about their system? How are they building a better team and building a better app? And they can use Gremlin today. We have a free product called Gremlin Free. So those small companies can dabble and learn and start there. And then, if they want to jump into more chaos engineering, they can work with us to collaborate. But from the meetup that I run in the Twin Cities, single companies with a few people to big companies across the board, it's just a way to learn about your system and build better reliability.
So really, you don't have to be a huge company, and just, almost every organization can probably learn something from injecting a little chaos into the system there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You can log into our Gremlin free account and run your first experiment in just a few minutes just to see how easy it is, so that's the cool thing about it. So that's what technology helps us do, is make things easier, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So these status checks are out, coming out this week now, and then where do you go from there, Matt? What else? What's next? If you don't say anything that's going to get us in trouble, but what else can you tell us? What else can we expect to see maybe coming down the pike?
Yeah, just to talk about how Gremlin's using it. So we use Gremlin on Gremlin, right? And we run our experiments in production, and we schedule them, and we built in status checks with PagerDuty and like Datadog.
Sure.
So that's the real thing. Favorite tool, and through our status checks, you can talk to their APIs to see if your systems are behaving correctly, right? So with PagerDuty, with all of our scheduled scenarios, we first ask ourselves the question, are there any active incidents in the environment? Because if there are any incidents that are causing disruption already, we don't want to put more chaos into the system, right? So we're using it for that. And then we also use Datadog to validate our infrastructure is healthy before we inject more failure into it, right? But really with status checks, it's making you ask the question, is my system doing the right thing? So is it functioning correctly under failure? Am I getting monitoring and alerting? Am I scaling appropriately? What am I learning? Is it successful or not, right? And how to grow and iterate on each experiment. And really what we're trying to help the customer do is just learn about their system, close the feedback loop of running an experiment, learning about it, and then iterating on it, right? So we're taking that experiment and just growing it until people can they're content with their hypothesis and the results, and then challenging themselves to do better, right? Like how many nines do you need to be successful to have that great customer experience? And that's what we're trying to help companies do.
Excellent, man. I love it. So I'm taking it you're based in the Twin Cities with the Target background and running the Twin Cities meetup. Really, but Gremlin's a SaaS-based application or service that anyone in the whole world can use. It's not just a U.S. or North America or something like that.
Exactly. Yep.
Very cool. You mentioned the free version.
Yep.
What's the limitations, if any, on the free version?
Yeah, so Gremlin Free is just a great way to get started and introduced. So we have 12 different attacks available in the full suite of Gremlin, but we have some limitations with attack types in Gremlin Free. So you can run a couple. You can install a couple licenses on your hosts. You don't have unlimited installs for that. So, and we give you different scenarios to run and experiment on just to learn about your system. So definitely, there's definitely thousands of customers, just using our paid and Gremlin free just to learn and grow. So I wouldn't really call it limitations or not, but it gets them started on that venture for sure.
Sure, it gets them on the path. Matt, so here's a question I've always wondered about. How often should you inject a little chaos and see how it works? You don't want to do it every day. You got stuff to do, but what's the right cadence for that?
So what I've always said is whatever makes you a little bit uncomfortable, because you should always be prepared for that failure. Now, if you're pushing out code every day, you should be injecting some chaos experiments with that, right? You can bake it into your CI/CD pipeline, understand what configuration is drifting as you deploy code. The other way I look at it too is if you have new members on your team, so you just hired a developer, they're brand new, they're experienced, whatever, you should run them through some chaos experiments on your system to learn. One thing I always have said before, I got this quote from Andy Stanley, who's a leader. But he says, if you don't know why something is working when it works, you won't know how to fix it when it breaks.
When it doesn't.
And what we always advocate for is use Gremlin, to break your system so you can learn, and then you can fix it, right? Improve it.
I like that quote. I may steal that if it's okay with you, Matt.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't yours to begin with, right? What the heck? Yep.
No, I'll send it to you. Yeah, Andy Stanley. So he has a leadership podcast out there.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. I should have asked in the beginning. People, is it gremlin.com? Where do people go to get more information on Gremlin?
Yeah, no, for sure. So www.gremlin.com. And if you do gremlin.com/gremlin-free-software, you can create your own free account. And we also
Very
have
cool.
Twitter, LinkedIn, all that you can find.
All the usuals.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, man. Hey, Matt Schillerstrom from Gremlin. Thanks for joining us on TechStrong TV today, man. I appreciate you telling us about it. All right.
Sure, thanks.
Check it out at gremlin.com. The new status checks are out this week. So it gives you that security blanket in case you're a little too worried about your chaos engineering. Matt, we'll be looking to hear more from Gremlin in the future. Thank you.
Yeah. Have a great one, everybody. Thanks.
All right. Alan Schimmel, TechStrong TV. Hey, man, we'll be right back with our next guest.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
One of the great things about being the founder, editor-in-chief of DevOps.com, Security Boulevard Container Journal, is just some of the really amazing people I get a chance to interact and meet with. And many times, a lot of the people I meet, I become friends with. One person I'm really proud to consider a friend, as well as just proud of what he's accomplished, and not just him, right? The fact is, it's a whole company. It's the 3 co-founders there. But I always get a good feeling when I spend some time with my friend Shlomi Ben Chaim of JFrog. Shlomi, of course, is the CEO, one of the 3 co-founders there. And if you've ever had any interaction with Shlomi and the JFrog frogs, as he calls them, his frogs, you can really see the kind of company culture that they've built. To me, it epitomizes what you want to build in a startup, what DevOps culture is all about. And they just continue to do it, right? As they continue to scale and grow and expand, they don't lose the essence of what it is to be a frog. And it's because of Shlomi, quite frankly, right? I think it really comes down from the top, and he has some fantastic lieutenants there and people that on the team, but it starts with Shlomi, and it's always a pleasure to speak with him. As I mentioned at the top of the show, the JFrog Swamp Up event this year, which is always one of our favorites, is actually being done virtually. You can log on to JFrog, go to Swamp Up, and check it out. I think even it might have started yesterday or even the day before with training, but a lot of the sessions are on demand, and you'll be able to see them after the fact. But JFrog also made more than several announcements at Swamp Up this year. Two new things Shlomi keyed us into is something called bin ops, BIN, like binary ops, and edge ops, right? Moving stuff to the edge. Not that they're moving stuff to the edge, but they're recognizing the power of edge computing and how important a role the edge and edge computing will play going forward, and they're making an early play into edge ops. Also, announcements around continued development of JFrog pipelines as it becomes more of a CI/CD alternative choice in the market that really integrates with just so many different things out there. So Shlomi tells us about all of this, as well as kind of giving us a little taste of SwampUp, and of course, insight into the frog culture. So let's go down to my interview with my friend Shlomi Ben Chaim, CEO of JFrog.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in here on TechStrong TV. I'm really happy to have one of my friends on the show today. He needs no introduction to our DevOps.com audience, but if you're from Security Boulevard, you may or may not be familiar with JFrog. You should be. They actually have some great DevSecOps and security tools. But let me introduce you to Shlomi Ben Chaim. Shlomi is CEO and one of the co-founders of JFrog. Shlomi, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hey, Alan. Great to see you again.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Virtually this time. Hope that we will meet again soon.
I hope so. You know, we were talking off mic. Well, first of all, I was planning on being in San Jose this week for SwampUp, right? We were going to come up, and of course that was virtual, but it was a smashing success the last couple days here. And then, of course, you know, I was planning on going back to Israel this year for Yalla DevOps. And that'll also have to wait until next year in Jerusalem or whatever, as they say. But, yeah, or virtual, whatever. Who knows? But I hope to see you in person. But it's good to see your smiling face.
Thank you,
Shlomi.
Good to see you too.
Yep. So, Shlomi, let's first start with SwampUp. Of course, it was virtual this year, so a little bit different. But, you know, the world's gotten used to doing these virtual events. Tell me, as the CEO of JFrog, first of all, what was it like kind of having to pivot from a physical to virtual event? There are some things you could do virtually you can't do physically, right? So there's some pluses to it. But what was your experience? What did you think? Were you satisfied with how SwampUp comes out?
Wow, that's a great start. I'll tell you one thing. We had SwampUp scheduled in San Jose this year, and we actually plan to have the biggest SwampUp in the past 5 years since we started this DevOps user conference. We were all set and ready, and based on the success of last year in San Francisco, our marketing team and event team just planned something even greater than that for the community. And then COVID happened. And one thing that I keep learning and see happening is that companies that are adapting fast the new reality will provide. And my amazing marketing team recovered super fast from this very big change. And you know us, you know how personal we are. We are big huggers. Mm-hmm. And for us to move to a virtual platform was not something that we are used to. We love to meet our community and our users on the floor. But since this happened, we went creative and adapted this new reality with a virtual conference for the first time. And it also comes with some benefits. So we are sold out, over 2,500 registrations. We are going to podcast that in the Americas on June 23rd and 24th, and in EMEA on June 29th and July 1st. Now, this is something you cannot do when you do the on-site event. So we are very excited. It's going to be bigger than every other year. And we worked with great partners such as yourself, an expert that helped us understand how you build a virtual conference that will achieve at least the same goals as you wanted to achieve with the original Swamp Up.
Sure. So, and another thing you could do at the virtual event that you can't do in a physical is, look, if for some reason you're not around on the 23rd or 24th, and you can watch it on demand. Is Swamp Up available on demand as well, or will it be available? Yeah.
So starting from 2 years ago, we already invested a lot in AV and recording all the session and share it with our users. But the different feeling of being there with the love and the support of the community next to you is going to be now translated into our Zoom screen and video. And I hope that this next leap for JFrog will also be successful as it was in the past year. And yes, we will follow up with the recorded versions and recording sessions of Swamp Up.
So, so for our audience watching this, and this, of course, will be Thursday, June 25th. If you weren't able to catch Swamp Up live in the U.S., you can watch it on demand. Is the EMEA version sold out as well, Shlomi? Or maybe, because one of the nice things about virtual is even though in the EMEA you're broadcasting it in the EMEA time zone, you don't have to be in the EMEA to watch it. Could people register for the EMEA sessions at this point?
So for now, Swamp Up is split between two different goals. The first one is investing a lot in making our users DevOps expert, and therefore the first day is a full training day.
Right, it's training.
Obviously not going to be recorded because the engagement with the trainees is important, although virtual. The second day, there would be the keynotes and the announcement part of Swamp Up, and then we'll take all the sessions with the community to different tracks. It will all be recorded, and I'm sure that following Swamp Up, we will start to release it session by session.
Excellent. And look, we've put on a few virtual events, obviously, recently for folks, we are including our own. The nice thing is some of the training, it's not quite, it's different. It's not better, it's not worse. It's different than in person. But there's like in everything else, there are things you can do with the virtual training that are really quite interesting because you can bring in all kinds of other material. But I'm sure it'll be great.
Companies, especially in the software domain, is speaking about agility for over a decade, Alan. You've been there, right? Agility,
sure.
agility. These are times that you are not just testing, you are not just putting your software agility in test, you're also putting your organization agility in test. And if you will not be adaptive, if you will not stretch yourself to where you need to be, I think that this crisis and COVID thing will be harder for you. So I'm very happy to see that we are not just frogs, we are agile frogs.
Agile frogs, as they say. It's very true, Shlomi. We had, Emmett Keefe from Insight Ignite, Emmett. So Emmett keynoted one of our virtual events, but I also did some interviews with Emmett. What organizations are widening the gap between high performers and low performers, right? And unfortunately, it's crises like this, it's moments like this, where organizations that lean into the situation, that have practiced agile, DevOps, whatever, the whole gamut of what we've been talking about here for 6 years, they are accelerating. Right?
I completely agree. And, agility is one thing. The DNA of the company, as you well know, is another thing. JFrog was born into the 2008 recession.
Yeah.
So I think that when you are trained to live in different environments, when you respect that as part of your journey, I think you're better prepared. And I'm, for one, very excited to have SwampUp virtually. It doesn't mean that at the moment that I can go back and meet my community and share the hug, I will not do it.
I'm sure you will, and it'll be fine. Shlomi, I'd like to pivot a little bit. Some interesting news being announced at SwampUp, and thereafter. Talk to us. What's the big news?
Yeah, Alan, this is a great question because I think that news in user conferences sometimes become a marketing fluff made by the company, and it's very important for us to stay authentic and to align what we see in the market, what is the real pain, and what is the solution that we offer. Now, this was a rule that we always followed since 2008 that we founded JFrog. Yoav Landman, Fred Simon, myself, that was the rule. It's not a big stage that we will announce what will happen 2 years from now. We will announce something that you can go ahead, download, and use tomorrow. And following another rule, which is what we do is based on the pain that we see in the market. JFrog is a company of developers that build software solutions for developers. It's by developers for developers. And what we saw, and you remember it, what we saw before it was even phrased DevOps is that the world of building software and releasing software must be changed. We didn't disrupt the market by giving the community Artifactory. We created a category of managing binaries. And then in 2015, 2016, SecOps suddenly happened. SecOps didn't happen because security is something new. SecOps happened because developers were required to be more responsible. And the all security solution started to shift left toward the developer because we needed more releases. And nobody can have a bottleneck at the end of the process, at the end of the pipeline. And what we see next, and this is the exciting news of SwampUp, is that DevOps, SecOps, the next milestone is EdgeOps. We need to make sure that the DevOps vision will be fulfilled. And it will only be fulfilled if we will understand that the destination is not the developer's pipeline. The destination is the audience, the people that are actually consume software. And this is the edge compute. This is what we call edge ops. And this is why
Love it.
the rise of binaries is super important, because this is what you build and this is what you deploy.
So edge ops. I'm thinking you probably already have the domain, but it's something we will start covering on DevOps. Obviously, look, the whole edge thing is important, right? And especially as we're moving more of the resources to the edge, right? Shlomi, you've been in technology a long time. I've been in technology a long time. There's a pendulum. We insource, we outsource, we do we go right, we go left. We saw with cloud computing, a giant sucking sound as we moved all of our resources into this public cloud, right? And that became the computing center, where we compute. And, the data center, the server closet went away, right? Everything moved to the cloud. But now I think people are realizing that that's great to have that centralized cloud infrastructure for your compute. But there's so much here at the edge, right? Whether it's the edge of the SD-WAN at an office, or it's the edge wherever someone is looking at a phone or a computer, it's the edge. Right, so that pendulum is moved. Say, okay, we're not getting rid of the cloud. We're not getting rid of the central compute. But it is about the edge. It's also about, and I'm glad I heard you say this too. So I talked the other day. It's about the features. It's not about how much code you wrote. It's not about how often you released, or even how fast you released. Those are all important. But if the feature doesn't get to the end user to do what he wanted it to do, what good is it? And so this is, I think, I think it's a new focus going forward for us in the DevOps world and in the software development world.
You know, Alan, this is all true, and we've been asking ourselves, how come every time that we set the next challenge in our roadmap, it became a DevOps kind of standard. Nobody believed that binaries need to be managed, and then containers happen and microservices. This is all binaries. This is all images or artifact or binaries, packages, same thing. And I'm happy that we saw that. Then the second thing was, how can you manage security with a smarter solution that use your metadata and dependencies in order to automate this whole process, and SecOps happen. And now I think that everyone that understands what digital transformation means is aligned with what you said. Until it will not be in the hand of the user, the developers didn't finish their mission. It's not a completed mission unless it's in the hand of your users. And this is our journey. And you know our philosophy around liquid software. The destination is the user, not the developer. The developer is the champion of this change.
Yep. The release and the CI/CD is a good start, but it's what they're using. So how does this manifest itself in what JFrog is going to do now?
Yes. So this is all great. Philosophy, Edge Ops, that's the next milestone. This is great. What you actually do in order to change my life. And when we look at the dev to device kind of journey, what is it that JFrog can do better for you? And we with all the respect, we are just the binaries people. We are not the clouds, and we are not the IoT companies. So what is it that we do different? And we started with JFrog Distribution as part of our platform. JFrog Distribution is a component in our platform, a product in our platform that gives you a full secured process of pushing your binaries from the moment you have the bundle that is ready to be released until it's being consumed by the edge nodes that JFrog provides. Now, this is good and it's great. And it's create the circle of trust, as we call it in JFrog, because you have a fearless flow of continuous software release management. That's great. And if it goes from Artifactory to X-Ray, scanned, then to JFrog Distribution, this almost sounds great. And then Edge Ops happening. And what happened is that you have millions of edge edge points that need to be updated. So in order to manage this load, we are going to release what we call the peer-to-peer solution. And the peer-to-peer solution is a technology made by JFrog in order to communicate between the edges and to update one another and not to overload the mothership. So not all of them are pointing to one mothership, but also creating their own net. And our enterprise customers that we spoke with about these features and this next leap were very excited, because it's one thing to be fully automated and to adopt digital transformation, but scale is a challenge. And here we are facing a scale that is multiplied by the amount of edges that you have. So peer-to-peer is the first announcement. The second one, which also has to do with distribution, is having our assets, having Artifactory running on CDN. Yes. So if you want to share your binaries, to share your images, to share your software packages with the world and have your download center, for example, Artifactory on top of a CDN will allow that on every region, on every cloud instance. This is obviously more focusing on the cloud because of the CDN, but that's the JFrog Distribution and Edge Ops news for SwampUp. Obviously, it's all around what we call BinOps, because GitOps is great and it's important for the developers. But from the moment you start to create and fetch and cache and deploy your binaries. It's all about BinOps and not GitOps.
Love it. Let me ask you on the CDN. Someone could use any CDN. Is there a partner you're CDNing? Did you build your own CDN? What's the story?
No. So currently, we started with the AWS CDN, and mainly because of the very broad distribution of the CDN to every region. We started partnering with AWS, but you know us, we are universal. So very soon we will look at other solutions. If it makes sense, we will collaborate with other partners. In JFrog, we want to be focused on what we do best. We are not a CDN company. But if I can provide you with a better experience using our partner CDN, then I will do it for you.
Look, there's no doubt that, especially when you're talking edge, right? That being able to utilize that CDN to take the data to the edge, to take, in your case, the binaries to the edge, right, is critical, right? That's the only way to really get there in an efficient manner. Even on DevOps.com here and all of our sites, we utilize CDN, obviously, because you can't stream video without it, frankly. I mean, it's very, it's a difficult thing. Fantastic news. I love it. So we've got Edge Ops, we've got BinOps, like binary BIN ops. Is there anything else we're missing there? Sounds like a very busy SwampUp, but anything else, Shlomi?
Yes. So this all happened, as we all know. It all happened by technologies that enable the continuous integration and continuous deployment, because there's so many things that are new in the world of CI/CD. But if you are really focused on what is the big news, what is different in the world of CI/CD, you actually understand that the environment kind of pushed us to ask for something else. So you need tools that will scale with you, that will provide you with concurrent builds and multiple pipelines and multiple sources. And the freedom of choice goes all the way again to the CI/CD. JFrog is the only CI/CD solution. JFrog Pipeline is the only CI/CD solution that allow you to work with multiple sources. If you have GitHub and GitLab and Bitbucket all together to one pipeline. And JFrog Pipeline is also scaling with you to the level that you need to scale when you have multiple pipelines being built together and not having this very long queue of developers trying to push their update to the pipeline. And on the CD level, this is the news. The continuous deployment and JFrog Pipeline is kind of the line that connects all the dots between the different gates of DevOps. The continuous deployment of pushing binaries from one point to another and now to the edges is something that is also enabled by JFrog Pipeline, and we will share more news about the new features that JFrog Pipelines come with. Just to remind the audience, JFrog Pipeline is a result of an acquisition we've made 18 months ago. We acquired a company named Shipabel, and very happy to see it now completely merged into the JFrog platform.
Fantastic news. Shlomi, you guys never rest. Plague, COVID, whatever. You guys are doing your thing. When do you think? So SwampUp is always in June. Well, that's once a year anyway. The internal one. Well, we'll see how it goes, right? Sounds fantastic. Just for our audience, because they're going to see this on the 25th. You go jfrog.com, but is there a jfrog.com/SwampUp where they can go right in for some of this stuff?
There is a SwampUp website, obviously, but all the information will be available at jfrog.com. And
excellent.
Obviously, we will share the videos, the announcement. We have great speakers from the community, keynotes from Splunk and Microsoft, all kind of DevOps best practices. It's SwampUp at its best. And we are very excited not only to share the news, but also to meet our audience again and our users.
All right. Shlomi, my friend, it's so good to see you. Stay well and stay healthy. Best
Thank you
of
very
luck.
much, Alan. Great to see you. I'm looking forward to see you with no social distance. Just
I hope so, because I'm a hugger too, but okay. Hey, Shlomi Ben Chai, CEO of JFrog here on TechStrong TV. Check out Swamp Up. I know our friend John Willis will be speaking there. My partner Jane Grohl is speaking as well, I think. I believe she is. And a bunch of other stuff. And look, here's things to take out of this. Edge ops, bin ops, right? CI/CD pipelines, JFrog pipelines. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Okay, our next, that was a great interview, by the way, with Shlomi. It's always a pleasure to hear from him. Our next interview is pretty darn good, too. You know, David Cole has been a force in the cybersecurity space now for 12, 15 more years, 20 years. He joined forces with another force in the cyberspace, Mark Curphey. Mark, of course, was the founder of OWASP. Help put all of that stuff together. David and Mark found themselves both having left their most recent companies, and really decided, hey, it's time to focus in on what's needed in the AppSec space. And they came up with a company called OpenRaven. You know, with both of their knowledge and insight into the market, it's no wonder that they wouldn't come up with something that really kind of captures the moment here about what's needed to be done. They've been able to attract some top-tier VCs. They've come out of stealth now. There's obviously an open source component to this, open core. And I actually caught up with David Cole. And David and I had a good chat about OpenRaven. I hope to grab Mark on the show in the next week or two as well. But I think OpenRaven is going to be a startup to watch. We're going to mark it here at MediaOps as a hot startup to watch. And I think you'll be hearing a lot about them over the next weeks and months. So here now is my interview with David Cole, CEO, co-founder, OpenRaven.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on this next segment for TechStrong TV. My guest today is David Cole. David is the CEO, co-founder of a new company called OpenRaven. He's going to tell you all about it. Really excited. Hey David, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me on, Alan.
Hey, it's our pleasure to have you here. So David, OpenRaven. Let's tell us all about it. I know a little of your background, but weave that into it as well if you can.
Yeah. So last, I want to say March, Mark Curphey and I have been longtime friends, both industry veterans. Mark had just got done about a year before selling his company to CA Veracode. Mark is a longtime guy in AppSec. He's actually the founder of OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project. And Mark and I go back to the heady days of the 90s with internet security systems. Always wanted to work with Mark. I had just got done with Tenable, getting through the IPO and then stepping out from there. And we were looking out at the landscape and said, amazing, we're both available at the same time. Let's talk about what we think the future of security looks like. And one of the first things that we saw was, if you look back through the periods of time, you had the whole network is the perimeter, build a moat, put a firewall around the perimeter, protect the network. Clearly that day is gone. Yep, you remember it well. Then we moved on to the phase of like, let's protect all the devices. Let's tackle that. And now, you ask yourself, how many devices do I even have at home, let alone on the corporate network? Does that seem such like a great idea? And you kind of project out over the future, and there's only a few control points that really make sense. And the one that was the most compelling was the data. You don't have a data breach without the data. So we said the future of security really is wrapping protection around the data itself. And there's many ways of doing it. And we looked at the players that were in the market. And the legacy players were born in a different era. They were born in the, before big data in many instances, when, you're chasing office files and you're classifying, hopefully, unstructured data and so forth. And that, has its place, but it also has a lot of challenges. You're hard pressed to find people who love DLP. Especially now that it also means distance learning program. That didn't help DLP at all, from a PR perspective. And then we looked at the new school players and said, surely there's a bunch of new players in the space too. And they were heavily focused on compliance for very understandable reasons. GDPR, CCPA are real, and there's a lot of gaps there. But as we looked at it, we said, wait a minute, there's some fundamental data security problems that aren't being solved, because everybody we spoke to said, in kind of veiled terms initially, they said, I don't know where my data is in the cloud. And we started to drill into that. And basically what you found is the amount of data that people have now is staggering. It's changed dramatically over time, from a time when, database administrators jealously guarded the data that was there, to now when data scientists, product managers, marketers, everybody in the organization is awash in data. A lot of it's in the cloud. It used to be that you probably lost some files previously. You can lose entire data centers now that pop up overnight in the cloud. Then you've got not just one cloud, but the world is increasingly multi-cloud, either by strategy or you made an acquisition or somebody stood something up that you weren't quite aware of. And what's happened is just this massive sprawl of important data everywhere. And as a result, we looked at it and said, wow, privacy is important. And some of those old school kind of challenges are still there too. But the big problem that we see being played out over the headlines in all these nonstop data leaks that we've almost become desensitized to is the very foundations of data security is knowing where your data is, knowing how it's protected, and make sure it's being protected in the right way and taking action when you need to. And we felt there was a huge gap sitting right there with foundational data security. So we looked at it and said, great, let's take that on. It's a huge problem. We're at the stage of our career where only huge problems are really interesting. And, we said, why not us? Let's take it on and see if we can't reinvent data security for a modern era.
Excellent story, man. I love it. And for those who don't know Mark Curphey, Dave's co-founder at OpenRaven, Mark's someone who I've known for, I think a lot of people in the security industry have known Mark for a really long time. And of course, we all know Tenable and Ron and Renault and the whole Tenable team. And well, it's kind of a new team there now, but Ron's still there on the board. But anyway, so you've got really two industry veterans, as you said, but more than just, veterans are just people who've been there for a long time, but two kind of real thinkers, movers in the space coming together with it. And so you guys announced funding. Was it this week, last week?
We did.
You announced the funding round?
Yeah. We announced it this week. So we announced our seed funding in February of this year. We did it last year. I think we actually closed it in April of last year, but we really, we're not a funding company, we're a product company. So we held the announcement. We didn't talk about it publicly until we had the platform ready. So we just kind of hunkered down and took care of our business and built the, initial version of the platform. We announced in February, right before RSA, which in hindsight was perfect timing. We got a little lucky on that one. And then the world went upside down right after we announced, right after RSA. And we had planned to raise our Series A funding later after we were a little further along. But Kara Nortman, our VC, our partner at Upfront here in LA, was nudging us and saying, you need to close your A now. Nobody knows what the world's going to look like in the future. So we still have plenty of money in the bank, but it was great advice. And fortunately, we'd already been talking to Kleiner Perkins for some time, and we were able to work it out. But it was bonkers. We closed our Series A against the backdrop of the pandemic, the market collapse, lockdown beginning, and everything else. And we couldn't be happier. Kleiner's been just, even in the early days, just an amazing partner. Bucky Moore's on our board now. Bucky's been fantastic. So, the way we look at it is we have a great seed investor here from LA, which was important to me. I've been in LA since '96 and always kind of trekking everywhere, whether it was back to Baltimore area for Tenable in Columbia, Maryland, or whether it was up the coast, for Symantec and CrowdStrike and so on. So it was great to be able to take money from here, but Kleiner brings a whole nother element, being a classic kind of a titan of Sand Hill Road up there and all that whole perspective. So it's
sure. It's a blue blood. But within the security, so Kleiner is, KP is royalty among the VC crowd. But within security, Upfront is not, chopped liver, as they say. But that being said, the couple of things I've learned from doing some venture-backed startups over the years, and that is, number one, the best time to raise money is when you really don't need it, right? And then number two, excuse me, number two is, in uncertain times like this, it actually, every good company I've ever founded was founded in uncertain times. Whether it was right after the dot-com bubble burst, right? The dot-com burst, or right in around 2008, 2009, around with the recession. It's almost like in times of choppiness or uncertainty, new growth, some of the old growth kind of moves out of the way and the sun gets to shine down, and new growth can take root. So I think that's a great thing for you guys. Let's talk about OpenRaven. So there's an open source component to it or a free component to it.
Yeah, that was part of the ethos of the company, and part of what Mark and I had agreed to is we looked at it and said, how many security products have we built lately that owe a huge debt to the open source community? How many, cloud platforms have we built? I put down the foundations of the CrowdStrike platform, moved on to do the same thing with Tenable.io over at Tenable. And, the stark reality is we used a lot of open source. Now, both of those organizations gave back in their own right, but there's a difference between giving back and having a company who's at its core has in its belief system the need to give back, and also the belief of transparency too. And we felt like, what greater way to recruit engineering talent than to say that, look, what you do is going to be visible to the world, and invite other people to contribute to that as well. What better way to create sustainability for the enterprise? What better way to court the engineers and the developer talent that's at these organizations increasingly is found in security teams? They want to see it, they want to touch it, they want to feel it, just like the cloud teams we've been on. And that extensibility is great, but it was also part of just morality too. It's like the right thing to do is for us to be generous and to give a significant portion of our code base into, put it over on GitHub and make it accessible. Now, you can't do all of it. We have a very intentional open core model. Even the community edition is not entirely open source. There's things that we decided that we had done that was core IP inside the user experience and in other places that we weren't comfortable open sourcing. We may do it later, but we didn't feel comfortable doing it in the beginning. But the concept is, open source at its core. The community edition is a free entry point to the product line, which, is one of those things where, it really resonates in a time when people don't have budget to do new things oftentimes. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of friction with trying new things when people are in the middle of a crisis. So the free entry point was also another kind of statement on transparency. The companies that we love and respect, whether it's Zoom, whether it's HashiCorp, or whether it's things outside of tech, we can touch and feel the product before we have to start a commercial relationship,
Yeah,
before we have to pay for it. And we felt like there simply wasn't enough of that in security. And we felt like it would juxtapose nicely against, all of the, hyperbole and at times snake oil inside security. Touch it, feel it, make sure it's for you.
It's funny, Dave. So first of all, I have this theory I call the democratization of IT and how open source fits in there. Number one, you're right about security, but what's ironic or even sad is that there was a time where open source security tools were the hot stuff, right? When Snort was open and that was the IDS everything was based on, and ClamAV, right, was giving the semantics of the world their run, and even at Tenable, Nessus, right? Almost that whole industry of vulnerability scanning was based on Nessus. Nessus open source engine, and over time, at least in security, we got away from it. But the other thing we've seen, though, Dave, is, 10, 15 years ago, I'd go to an RSA or to any tech conference, not even security, and a guy like you would sit there and say, oh yeah, we're big proponents of open source, we give back to the community, and we support a lot of open source projects. I remember being at an RSA conference on a panel once, and I don't even want to mention the company, but my friend Mike Rothman was the moderator of the panel, and some guy spouted that BS, and I said, you know what, I'm so tired of it. Can you name one open source project that your company's ever contributed any code to, any resources to, other than just parasiting and using it? And he couldn't. And that was a lot of, that was the lip service back then. I think today with the democratization of IT, people don't hire expensive enterprise sales guys who take the CIO out for dinner at Morton's or something. They get the software into the people's hands and say, use this. It's free right now. Use it. If you like it, then let's talk about, what you need to do to buy support or more functionality or, whatever it is you want to buy. But it's about getting it in their hands and delivering delight. And that's the model today. And that's why, look, we cover DevOps a lot, right? Besides security.
Yeah.
Everybody's putting money into DevRel, developer relations, DevOps relations. SecRel, I guess, is the security piece of it, right? So instead of hiring security salespeople, hire security community relations people whose job it is to say, hey man, check this out, give it a try, it doesn't cost anything, first one's free, and let them go with it. And there's no reason, and that is becoming the dominant model, I think, of go to market.
100% agreed, and it's long overdue in security. And I think some of the things we see, like Crown Sterling, we saw previously, the snake oil that was there, that's really we think it's the sign of hitting that apex of that point to where enough's enough and something has to change. And you're seeing companies, we don't by far, we're not going to be the only one who does this, and we've already seen Corelight. I think Corelight's a good example. Riding on the success of Zeek, formerly known as Bro. Corelight's a good example of, a company that's come before us who's done an open core model, and there'll be plenty of other ones.
There are
as well. Yeah.
I mean, look, if you ever go to a KubeCon or the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, there are, it's probably one of the most high energy communities that I've come across. And I go to a lot of, back when the world used to have conferences, I'd go to a lot of conferences. And that cloud native computing community is, and it is about the open source there because people, but there's plenty of companies who are A, raising a lot of money, B, have great valuations, and C, have great businesses around that open core model. GitLab, another perfect example, right? Look at a company like GitLab. So this is exciting. So, Dave, you guys have been working a year on this, right? A little more than a year, it sounds like. You're out of stealth. You've raised your A round with KP. What's next here? I know it's a funny time with everything going on, but what's next?
Yeah, so right now we've got kind of three focus areas. One is getting as many people as we can onto the community edition, which is completely free. It's not a limited use trial. It's completely free. And I think actually today, the foundations of that will be going up on GitHub. So you can visit our GitHub site if Community Edition isn't for you, or you can try Community Edition and fall back to that. It's if you're wondering what it's like, it's a little bit like Lyft's cartography project. For those who are familiar with that. Our second focus is we're moving on to our paid product. So our paid product focuses on taking the data that you found and really understanding its status, doing inventory and classification on the data, telling what data is inside it, but also understanding elements of identity and connectivity as well, so that we can wrap protection around that, monitoring policies and protection policies and so forth, so that you can answer key questions like, where's all my PII? How is it being protected? Is it being protected in a way that I'm comfortable with, that meets, my security standards, my regulatory standards, or meeting my compliance needs and so forth? The third focus we have is we are running a monitoring service over the course of the summer. So there's a bunch of folks, we've gotten clear feedback that security teams are incredibly strapped. And for a small number of folks, and if anyone's interested, they should talk to us. We're going to be helping folks hands-on running the platform over the course of the summer, because we think it's vital that we use our own product, that we understand it deeply, and that we kind of lock arms with the customers. It's something we did at CrowdStrike that was very successful. And it's a playbook that I know plenty of other folks have run too. And it comes from a place of, if you want to understand your product, you want to build a great product, walk in the shoes of your customers, live and breathe with them. So we just brought in a great guy to run that for us.
Very cool, man. Dave, we're about out of time here. I got to apologize, but first of all, congratulations to both you and Mark. Tell them I said hi.
Will do.
You know what we didn't say? The website. People want to get more information. Where did they go?
Yep. Real easy. Openraven.com. So it's spelled just the way it sounds. Nice and easy.
Open Raven, like the bird. A little Baltimore connection there still. As a Steeler fan, it's a little knife in my heart, but it's okay. But Dave, seriously, best of luck with Open Raven. We'll be watching this. It has all the ingredients. Highly successful, entrepreneurial team, great VCs, and as you said right from the outset that we didn't really jump more into, data. We're starting to realize that data is paramount, and it's not just in security. This whole data ops movement that we're seeing, right, parallel to DevOps, and it's about the data at the end of the day. And we went through our big data thing and the Hadoops, and now Cassandra and all that. But there's so much more out there, Apache Spark and some of the other stuff. So we'll keep an eye on it. Come back and give us an update soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Alan. I appreciate it.
All right. David Cole, CEO, founder of Open Raven, new security company concentrating on data, or DataSec, maybe we call it. I don't know. Dave, good luck. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest on TechStrong TV. At our recent TechStrong conference, we had over 50 speakers, 100 hours of video. And, we received a ton of feedback from the 3,600 or near 4,000 people who registered and have watched videos on the event. One of the most highly liked, commented, praised sessions was by Patrick O'Neill of FedEx Services. Patrick's session on cloud automated governance struck a chord with people who deal with this issue day in and day out. And, it's possible to do, and Patrick's going to show us how. So there's a relatively, this is one of the shorter sessions at TechStrong Con, actually. It was only about 20, 21 minutes, but I think it's a great watch. So let's now go to TechStrong Con and pull up Patrick O'Neill Cloud on Cloud Automated Governance. Before we do, though, just a reminder, all the TechStrong Con sessions are still available on TechStrongCon.com, and they'll be up, I believe, on the Digital Anarchist site. We have some big news coming up on Digital Anarchist in about 2 weeks, so stay tuned. All right, Patrick O'Neill, FedEx, Cloud Automated Governance.
Good morning, good day, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might happen to be watching this from. My name is Pat O'Neill. I'm a cybersecurity fellow for FedEx, and I'm here today as a part of the TechStrong conference. And I wanted to talk to you about the ONUG collaborative around cloud automated governance. We have an interesting quandary in cloud computing today, as some of you are probably no doubt aware. If you're working in a large enterprise and you're trying to use a multiple of clouds, you'll find yourself encountering a lot of these issues, and the issues are rather multifarious. When you consume public cloud, you're looking at it from the perspective of securing a tenant, right? Everybody has the same issue from a security perspective. You know, you get the same question from your customer as well as your CISO. Is it secure, right? Well, today there's a shared responsibility model between the tenant and the provider that says, okay, I've got responsibility for part of that, and the other side has responsibility for part of that. If you're the provider, you've got responsibility for the hypervisor and all the infrastructure and the plumbing, and they take great pains in securing that and do a wonderful job of doing so. But your visibility is limited to what you can see as the provider. And if you're the customer, you're consuming cloud, your visibility is limited to what you can see as the customer. So there's a dividing line between what you can see and what the provider can see, and today just nobody crosses that line. So what we're talking about today is precisely that problem space. You know, if you look at how most large enterprises consume public cloud, they often do it in a way that they can actually insulate themselves from being tied into just one cloud. We all want scalability, and we often want scalability across multiple availability zones, and we also want scalability across multiple cloud providers, right? You never want to necessarily have the whole house of cards go down because one provider went down. So obviously there's a fundamental need to, you know, deploy in a multi-cloud environment. But we have no way today of doing the same thing across all those providers from a security perspective. And to a certain extent, we don't have a way of doing the same thing across those providers as a tenant, just as a deployer of code, right? So let's dive in a little bit and see what I'm actually talking about here. Okay, so what you can see here is a diagram that loosely follows what the shared responsibility model looks like and where it can go, right? Today in that shared responsibility model, like I said, we have sort of a dividing line between the cloud service provider and all of our internal systems. But most people that are deploying in cloud, I say most people, you know, large enterprises certainly, they're on a journey. And that journey is all about CI/CD, infrastructure as code, and automated deployments. And the reason that they're on that journey, you know, is obviously for speed. We want to be able to deploy and maintain change rates that are much faster than we've done in the past. And we want to maintain elasticity across multiple AZs and cloud providers. But there's another reason we're also doing this, and that's for the sake of security. And, you know, we definitely can see benefits from the whole enterprise when you have a deployment in multiple cloud providers as well as on-prem. Then you've got a much better reliability posture than you could achieve before. So it only makes sense to be working in multi-cloud environments. But today, and I'm going to unshare that for just a moment because I'm going to come back to that diagram in a few. But that's just to set the context, right? One of the main things that we run into when we're trying to do that kind of a deployment model is that we want to be able to consume in a consistent way. So, I mean, whether you're using Terraform or Puppet, Chef, Ansible, Bosch, there's lots of different ways to deploy stuff into the cloud. But you've seen, if you're, as exposed to some of the variant ways that people consume cloud as I am on a daily basis, you've seen a coalescing over the last couple of years to container-based deployments, usually in things like PCF or Kubernetes. I think it's pretty clear now that Kubernetes is the favorite model, if you will, across the industry, and probably continuing to improve in that way. So what does that mean? If you're using Kubernetes on-prem and you're using Kubernetes in the cloud, and you're using, you may be using managed Kubernetes in the cloud, or you may be managing your own in the cloud for the sake of consistency, right? A lot of people do that. And when you look at that problem space, from the customer perspective of a cloud provider, you want to be able to say, I deployed this in exactly the same way across all these different cloud providers, and I can see and attest to exactly the same security posture across those cloud deployments. Well, that's where you get into trouble, right? When you're trying to basically say to your customer or to your CISO that it is in fact secure, what do you have to do? Right? As a security practitioner, you have to do a lot of different things based on which cloud you're deploying in. Even if you use the same CI/CD technology, even if you use the same provisioning and trusted provisioner technology across all your different cloud deployments, you still got a lot of different knobs to turn and buttons to push in the security console of the day of your particular cloud provider. Right? That's a problem. And that's a problem that ONUG has attacked with the Cloud Automated Governance Working Group that I'm actually a part of. And that's why I'd like to talk to you today, because what we're trying to do with that ONUG working group is establish a standard that we can use across the cloud providers that will benefit both the customers and the cloud providers themselves to solve this problem space in a far more sane way than we can today. So let's get into that a little bit. As we've been talking about these different gaps, let's dive into a couple of the interesting gaps that we have from a direct security perspective. And I'm going to try and share another picture right quick, if I can find it. Okay. So what you're seeing here is a context that's pretty common. When you deploy into a cloud provider, you're either deploying containers or you're deploying other infrastructure as code, things that rely on VMs. But those VMs are usually included within a VPC, and all of that is handled within the context of a hypervisor managed by the cloud provider. Now, before we get into this diagram, some of the stuff on the bottom there, one of the fundamental problems that you have from a security perspective is being able to observe intent related to an event. So as you can see, if you've got containers that are running on a VM, and let's say a VM that you've allocated inside of your tenant suddenly goes away, right? That could happen for a whole variety of reasons. One of the reasons it could go away suddenly is simply the provider needed to migrate that workload to another piece of actual bare metal. It could be that, there was a hard drive failure on the tenant side that the provider was reacting to. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons that could occur that are perfectly valid reasons why a VM suddenly might disappear. And your deployment provisioner usually reacts to that, especially, like Kubernetes or Bosch or one of these things will actually then redeploy that VM from the image just like, you would expect it to. But what you don't know as a tenant is why. Now, in the event that that was something that was orchestrated by the hypervisor on behalf of the provider, where they're actually reacting to something that they need to migrate that workload for, they know what's going on. They could tell you. And that's exactly what this diagram here is trying to show a way to do. If we could emit into the event logs from the actual provider, a event that says, hey, this VM was actually shut down for this reason. And we sign that with a private key that belongs to that provider, and the provider injects a public key that we can use to validate that signature, then we have a trust root now that will let us say, okay, this was an expected event. This is not something that we should be surprised about, and it's not something that we should scramble a security team to investigate. Conversely, if something happens and we don't see a signed event attesting that it is in fact valid, we know we better dang well scramble real quick and see if somebody's trying to escalate to the hypervisor or some other kind of escalation attack within our tenant. So this is the kind of problem that we're trying to solve in the context. And there's some more context I'll touch on in a moment, but all of this is related to a white paper that the ONUG Cloud Automated Governance Working Group has published. So as a part of that ONUG working group, we recently had a publication of a white paper, and that white paper is basically trying to lay out some of these, describe in detail some of these realities and use cases where we see a gap today and where we think that there's some ways to attack this problem. And that's really where this diagram comes in, is just like that other diagram, suggesting a way we can improve the relationship between the tenant and the provider. Just like this shared responsibility model illustrates here, we have a way that we can use our internal systems depicted on the lower right to deploy, to derive compliance artifacts, to basically keep up with what we're doing. You remember a moment ago, we looked at that key diagram where they could send us an attested event that shows by signature that it actually came from the provider, and we have a means to trust that. We could do exactly the same thing in a metadata sense from our CI/CD pipeline and say, okay, not only are we going to use a particular set of credentials to deploy into one of these cloud providers, but we're also going to tag it with metadata, and just about everybody's doing that today. You know, whether you're using automated provisioning or not, you know, that's really the only tool you have today to actually keep track of the ephemerality of all these things that you're deploying into a tenant. So add some metadata there that in fact is signed. You've got control of a private key. You can provide the public key to the actual cloud provider and then sign that. Now, whether the cloud provider makes use of that is an interesting question, but there's no reason they couldn't, and do things for you on your behalf. Like say, okay, if we don't see a particular container or VM or artifact deployed, and it's not tagged with a signed piece of metadata that came from the tenant, we assume that somebody's escalated to the credentials of the customer and is doing something surreptitious, right? That would strengthen the posture that we have today, right? It's in essence almost a form of two-factor authentication in a sense, right? I don't know if any of y'all have had the experience of trying to reconcile security audits across the different cloud providers, but it's a bit wild and woolly today because of the difference in how information is surfaced to you by the cloud providers. And that's exactly what this diagram is showing, is we can come up with a better way. And we can come up with a better way that's also very, very helpful for another very important piece of the puzzle, and that is compliance. Now, security is not the same thing as compliance, but compliance is also very important. Anybody that works for a publicly traded company or a Fortune 500 company knows that, right? So what do you do to try and enhance speed? We've all been on the journey of trying to enhance speed and use cloud native technologies, and in doing so for the last several years. So part of that is, let's stop using manual effort to derive compliance artifacts, especially when they apply to something that is as ephemeral as something that may go away suddenly within a cloud tenant. Instead, let's leverage what we're doing from an automated sense with infrastructure as code and immutable infrastructure, and derive those compliance artifacts in a signed attestable manner as part of that trusted provisioning process. If we can do that, we not only make our lives easier, we make the auditors and compliance regulators' lives easier that are trying to attest to our posture from a compliance perspective. And we also actually have a new set of data to rely on that's far more timely than what we've done in the past when it comes to compliance audits, right? If you look at on-prem stuff over the last couple of decades, most of the large enterprises have had to do things like scramble around and go and collect information. It could be files from various deployments, archives of logs, screenshots, and what have you, for the sake of some poor auditor to actually review. And that information is by its very nature stale from the time when it was collected. We can do better than that. In an automated fashion, we can actually have that auditor reviewing live information and attested, signed information, so we can actually have a trust root to fall back on that says, hey, this is exactly what's deployed, why it was deployed, and the images that it was deployed with. So that's really where we're trying to get to, and we're trying to, shall we say, send out a clarion call about exactly what we're discussing here and get people to recognize this is a good idea. This is a helpful idea. And if we can get the providers on board with it, it'll help the whole industry. It's a sort of a tide that rises all boats, so to speak. And so what I'm also asking y'all today is to get involved, right? And let's talk about that a little bit too. Okay, so this is the site for the ONUG Collaborative, right? It talks a little bit about that automated cloud governance white paper that I alluded to. And it also gives you a place you can go to help understand several of the efforts that ONUG owns, not just the one that I'm talking about today. They also are involved heavily in SD-WAN and open state data and several other things, including container security. So if you would like to help, we can use all the help we can get from anywhere in the industry. Please, help us out and we'll get it moving. We already have quite a few people involved, but we can always use more eyes on it, and we can always use more help with it. And I think it's something that, you can help your providers understand the nature of the need of their customers better. When we talk about how to do this, and you'll find some references to this in that paper, there's another term that I want to leave you with, and that's governance as code, right? If we accept the premise that we can actually create attestable real-time compliance artifacts, and we accept the fact that we can build roots of trust that allow us to bridge that dividing line between the provider and the tenant, then let's take it a step further. Let's go ahead and automate the attestation of what we need deployed or validated in our deployment. We can already observe certain things about the security of our deployment, but with that metadata and the combination of the things that we can get from the providers, if we can get them to actually provide it in a common format, we can start looking at the event logs coming at us from all of the different providers in the same way. Now today, when you consume an event log from the multiple providers, say you're a large company and you're using a SIEM on-prem, right? You're going to be stuffing all of those logs into your Splunk or whatever technology you use to actually manage all that log data. And your parsing of that log data will vary by provider. We would argue that there's really an opportunity there to make those events and that information adhere with a much more common format across the providers. If you look at the providers, their viewpoint is that all of their offerings are quite distinct, and they have a vested reason to believe that. It's because they compete on features. But when you look at how people consume public cloud, they're not so interested in the features so much as they are, I want availability by actually consuming from multiple providers. So if I'm looking at that from the lens of a Terraform or a Kubernetes deployment, driven by, Terraform or some other Ansible, whatever provisioning technology I prefer to use, I am actually interested in saying, okay, how can I attest that the deployment I laid out with my infrastructure as code approach is the same across the different providers? That's a fundamentally different view from what we often see, shall we say, provided in the logging streams and various logging interfaces and security information provided by the providers today. And I don't think it's that necessarily different, that it would be such a far cry. It's just somebody's got to say, hey, what is the common format that we can all agree to? And that's where ONUG and this collaborative comes in. So we definitely need all the help we can get. We would love to get all of your participation. And it's definitely something, I think, if you stop and think about it and look at what we're actually trying to do, it just makes perfect sense. It may be, something where we need to get the providers a little bit more on board with it. But I think we've just sprung it on them here in the last few weeks. So let's give them a little time to digest it. And let's see if we can't get more people to help them understand that this is a really common need across their customer base. And I think they'll be excited to actually jump on board, and we'll end up with a win-win that definitely rises the tide, shall we say, for all boats. So anyway, that's what I'm here to pitch to you today. And like I said, we can use all the help we can get. We will be taking questions as a part of this is actually pre-recorded, this part, but we will be taking questions on the day that it is actually shown. And I look forward to interacting with you further.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that informative session by Patrick on cloud automated governance. And now we're moving along with our show. We are going to go to the news. As usual, the news is just a roundup of headlines across our sites. Let me give them to you, starting with Container Journal. We have the strangler pattern, dealing with legacy code in the age of containers. It's a good article. I think for the, we all don't have the luxury of being in a green field, and there is legacy code. And good article on what to do with that. And then some news coming out of the CNCF, Cloud Native Computing Foundation. They are graduating Harbor Container Registry. And if you're familiar with CNCF, they bring them in, they incubate them, they graduate them. And so Harbor is making progress as it matures, and it's now been graduated. So congratulations to all the folks around that, as well as just another great job by CNCF. Check the article out. Over on Security Boulevard, we have business continuity, planning for the next pandemic, as if you haven't finished dealing with this pandemic. But I think one of the lessons of this pandemic is we do need to plan for the next pandemic. We can certainly do a better job. So good article there on business continuity. Also, emergencies and cyber attacks, 3 common scams. There's I saw a scam today for ransomware masquerading as a Canadian contact tracing app. It just doesn't end. So these are 3 common scams for you to be on the lookout for. Have a look at the article. There's more than 3, obviously, but these 3 are highlighted there. Then heading over to DevOps.com, we have code quality doesn't have to be like the weather. Everyone talks about it, but no one ever does anything. It's a little tongue-in-cheek, but I thought it was a great article. Go check that one out and tell us what you think. Also, we have 5 ways traceability is changing to bolster the remote workforce. I think we're seeing, rapid maturation, rapid evolution in remote workforce kind of capabilities, and this goes with that. And then we have news out of the Eclipse Foundation today, so big day for open source foundations. Touting progress on Jakarta, which is with Eclipse Foundation, good stuff there. And then over in our IT is Code section of DevOps.com, we have Nebulon unveils hybrid cloud computing platform. Good article. Check that one out. As usual, guys, these are just some of the headlines on our sites. There's 40, 50 articles a day on Security Boulevard, 6, 7 on DevOps.com, and usually 2 or more on Container Journal. So please do check them out. There's so much good information there that you can really learn from and do that. Now, though, it's time to head over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor. Charlene has an interview with Hazelcast. Good information there. And she'll also be giving you a preview of next week's webinars on Media Ops. So let's head over now to Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor for Media Ops.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I'm here now with David Brimley, who is the Chief Product Officer at a company called Hazelcast. Hi, David. How are you? Welcome.
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, I want to talk a little bit about in-memory computing, but first, maybe you can tell me a little bit about Hazelcast.
Sure. So Hazelcast is an open source led company. We have two products, an in-memory data grid and a stream processing engine. And we're, as I said, we're primarily interested in in-memory computing. So that's the business of using the memory of systems to provide low latency processing for applications.
Okay. All right. Great. So I imagine that as a number of companies are going through their digital transformation efforts, especially in light of the pandemic and the fact that so many companies have to actually undergo digital transformation for their survival, they're now running into issues related to speed and latency on the network, and so I imagine, as I understand it, in-memory helps reduce a lot of that latency. But there's also a security issue as well when we're talking about speeds and feeds on the network. So I guess probably the first thing that organizations need to understand is why they're actually experiencing latency. So can you kind of go through what are some of the biggest causes of latency on the organization's network?
Sure. In terms of application latency and the speed it takes an application to respond to some kind of request, the biggest problem is the legacy architectures that we have in organizations today are primarily built around one central data store, which is disk bound, and then the applications connect to that disk store. So, I'm generally thinking about a relational database or a system like that. And so what organizations do to improve the latency on those systems is they try to scale out by adding extra processes. But the problem they have with this is that they're still disk bound. They're still waiting for the disk to react to their operations. And so what an in-memory technology like Hazelcast does is it provides a layer over the top of some of these systems and provides an in-memory version of that data that is stored in the database. And so applications can talk directly to Hazelcast. They can get their information from Hazelcast. And then Hazelcast takes care of any updates that the application makes and ensures that they're pushed down to the slower databases and data stores. So this is one way in which we tackle that latency problem. The other thing that in-memory data grids and in-memory technologies are very good at is scalability. It's very, very easy to scale an in-memory technology like a Hazelcast by adding more processes. So you simply run more programs to add into the Hazelcast grid. With a relational database technology or mainframes or any of these traditional storage systems that businesses run on, scaling something like that takes many, many days, weeks, or even months of talking to vendors and buying extra software, and it's a far more complicated business than it is. I'd just like to talk also about the security aspects, as you mentioned. The security side of things is very, very important, especially to something like Hazelcast. We have to ensure that your data is secure as it moves over the network. So Hazelcast provides online encryption, so TLS encryption. And then it also needs to ensure that whilst the data is in the Hazelcast process itself, it's secure. And so we provide default access control, security roles-based access control. And we also provide encryption. So we encrypt the data as well. And we provide links into hardware-based and corporate-based security systems as well.
Yeah, so that need to kind of have speed on the network to reduce that latency, but also have security it sounds like your technology kind of covers both of those, so they get both the speed and the security, but which is great. And I'm sure a lot of organizations are now kind of peaking. I'm like, wait a minute, I can have both, because it sounds like so many organizations are still kind of sacrificing speed for security, or vice versa. Their security is maybe perhaps lagging because they've got to make sure that they've got uber responsive applications. So is in-memory computing something that pretty much any type of organization can do? I mean, are there certain considerations regarding networking infrastructure or cloud versus on-prem, things like that?
I mean, the thing with in-memory computing is that it goes hand in hand with distributed computing. So the way that an in-memory computing platform offers you scalability is many processes that combine together to offer their memory up as a whole. And to do that scalability, you're generally creating these processes over a number of machines, and therefore those machines to form a cluster are connected over a network. So that cluster as a whole is reliant on the speed of the network for its latency, not only amongst the cluster members who have to talk to each other, but obviously the network going back to the application has to be of a good speed. Otherwise, we're only as fast as the network we run on. So there are considerations that you need to take into consideration with in-memory computing. You need to make sure that the network is a stable network, and so that then moves on to cloud computing and making sure that you're running on a stable cloud. That said, in-memory computing technologies have evolved such that they can still run and still provide low latency when network problems occur. So that's one of the key features that we've started to build into products like Hazelcast, is the ability to keep the system running when your bunch of computers that you have, one of them breaks, or the network slows down, or a network card breaks. We're in the business of providing a low latency system when things go wrong, and that's one of our key features.
Excellent. So are there particular verticals maybe that would benefit more from in-memory computing?
So the genesis of our products and similar in-memory products was around about 10 years ago, where you had the investment banks were one of the first businesses that really needed ultra low latency for their trading systems. And so a lot of these in-memory computing systems have been born out of that requirement. And over time, more and more business sectors have cottoned onto the fact that they do need this type of system in their architectures. So people like e-commerce, people like credit card processors, logistics companies need this. It's any business sector that has seen an explosion in the amount of data that they're processing and the amount of consumers of that data as well. So it's not only the data that's being pumped into the system, it's the amount of people that need to draw the data out as well. And this is really where, in-memory computing is starting to come to the fore.
All right, great. So, from an application development perspective, then, what are some of the considerations that in-memory computing kind of forces developers to think about?
Well, ideally, we'd like the application developers to develop in the way that they would with just a regular application. That's the thing that we really drive at. So when you start to develop with an in-memory system and a system like Hazelcast, you'll find that the APIs that we give to our developers are pretty much the same APIs that they would use to develop with a traditional data store or a traditional back-end system. So we're really driving at keeping that same experience. They don't have to learn anything new. They can continue to develop their traditional APIs. And by some magic that Hazelcast provides, all of that data storage, the high availability, the low latency is just magically appearing for them.
Awesome. All right. Well, in-memory computing sounds like a great technology, and I imagine, as I said before, as more digital transformation efforts are underway, I imagine we're going to be hearing a lot more about in-memory computing. So, David, thank you so much for walking me through it. Really appreciate it. I hope we can have a conversation again in the future about it.
Thanks very much.
Great. Okay, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I'm here now to give you an update on some of the webinars that we have coming up on the sites. This Thursday, which is today, I believe, we have one webinar happening at 11 a.m. Eastern. It is how line data streamlines CI/CD and optimized AWS cloud spend. This is a case study of sorts, and it's sponsored by Harness. And as I said, it's happening today at 11 a.m. Eastern. This one focuses on how Line Data is transforming its business into a cloud-native, next-generation asset management platform. And as part of that, it's migrating its traditional monolith on-premises applications to microservices and serverless architectures. And those are running on Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure. So this webinar actually focuses on how the company is doing that and how it's using Harness technology to make that happen. This is definitely a compelling webinar for anybody who is interested in shifting gears into cloud native. It's definitely not worth missing. So definitely check that one out. Our next webinar is also happening later today at 1 p.m. Eastern. It is also another case study of sorts. It is how Texas Instruments is using InfluxDB to uphold product standards and to improve efficiencies. And this one and the webinar previous are both happening on DevOps.com. This one is happening, as I said, at 1 p.m. Eastern today. And it really looks at how Texas Instruments is using time series databases to gain better insights and into its industrial operations by collecting those high-level metrics and events, which is helping it overall improve its operational efficiencies and its overall productivity. So definitely another one worth checking out if you are interested in how time series databases work and how they're helping organizations increase their productivity and basically work better as a business. Our third webinar I wanted to focus on is happening tomorrow at 11 a.m. That's Friday, June 26th, and this one is on the Security Boulevard website. It is controlling cloud costs with HashiCorp Terraform. And this one actually is another demo-focused webinar, and it really is designed to introduce folks to Terraform and talk about cloud infrastructure automation and various approaches to managing cloud spend using modules. And as I said, it will include a live demo during the webinar. If you've been interested in learning more about Terraform, if you're interested in learning how to reduce your cloud spend through automation, definitely this is a webinar worth checking out. Again, it is happening Friday, June 26th, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern, and it is on Security Boulevard. So please check it out there. Actually, check out both DevOps.com and Security Boulevard for all of the upcoming webinars that we have. We have so many great topics coming up, and really something for everyone. So I encourage you to go to the websites, check out what we have on tap. Just go to DevOps.com/webinars, look in the upcoming section. Should be right there, a complete list waiting for you. Same thing with Security Boulevard. Just go to securityboulevard.com/webinars. Check out the upcoming section and see what we have on tap. You can also look at webinars that we already have on the sites that we've already done. They are in the on-demand section. So the same thing, just go to DevOps.com/webinars, look in the on-demand section, or securityboulevard.com/webinars, look in the on-demand section. We have tons of webinars there. So hopefully there'll be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 that pique your interest. But please do check them out. We've got so many great webinars on tap and on demand. So I hope there'll be something there for you. But for now, I do want to invite you to any of the webinars that we have upcoming. And as a moderator for these webinars, I hope to see you there. Thanks for your time.
I'd like now to, of course, after Charlene, we head over to our analyst corner with Mitch. And Mitch has 2 pieces up here. One is just some commentary on his usual commentary on what's going, state of the market and Mitch's take on things. Also, though, there's a video here. It's a replay, actually, of an interview Mitchell did with Rosalind Radcliffe, my friend Rosalind from IBM, Enterprise Z Systems, and it's DevOps mainframes and the economic rebound. Good stuff. Rosalind's always a pleasure to have on anyway. She was presenting this week over at DevOps Enterprise Summit, which again, virtual in London. Well, it's not in London, it's virtual. But anyway, it's always good to hear from Rosalind, and here she is with Mitch as well. So let's head now over to the analyst corner with Mitch.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. We're excited that you've joined us. We have a really fascinating topic and discussion we're going to have today. It's all about DevOps, mainframes, and the economic rebound. Of course, we all want that to happen. What's that going to look like? Today's webinar is sponsored by ASG Technologies. My name is Mitch Ashley. I'll serve also as host, but also as one of the folks that will contribute as a speaker today. So we do want to take care of a few housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar. All attendees will receive an email with a link to the recording and the slides that we use today. We're also giving away 2 $50 gift cards, so stick around to the end and find out if you're a winner. And last but not least, I want to make sure that we love questions. This is the dialogue. We all see lots of webinars, and we want this to be as engaging for not just us, but for you as well. So please enter any and all your questions in the questions tab on the GoToWebinar software, and we'll weave those into our conversation as the hour proceeds. Okay, so let's move on to our topic, DevOps, mainframes, and the economic rebound. It's my pleasure to introduce my 2, co-host guests, co-speakers. First is Anna Murray. She is Senior Product Manager with ASG Technologies. Then also Jeff Charrington, who is VP of Product Marketing with ASG Technologies also. So we're looking forward to having a great conversation with all 3 of us. So I'm going to kick things off. Actually, first, Anna, would you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do at ASG Technologies.
Sure. I'm currently responsible for the mainframe productivity solutions, including our JCL management solutions. And throughout my career, I have worked with development teams, sales and marketing, and executives to ensure the success of enterprise software products. And I'm really happy to be here today. So,
welcome. Good to be with you. Jeff?
Thanks, Mitch. Jeff Charrington with ASG. I've worked with enterprises around the world on both the buying side and the selling side, always focusing on working toward getting more value from the investments that the enterprise makes. And in fact, I hope that's what you'll hear we're offering in this discussion today. Mitch, back to you.
Very good. Great. Well, let's kind of get into the topic. Also want to note for our participants, the right-hand side of the screen, GoToWebinar, and my Mac decided to have a disagreement about how we're showing the screen today. So apologies for the little technical difficulty, but in these times of work at home and COVID, I think we all have got a little more flexibility with those kind of things happening. So just to set the stage for our conversation, one of the things that I get to do as an analyst in the industry is really look at trends and what's happening. And that's kind of difficult to do in today's environment where things are changing so quickly. I mean, if we of course have the health part of the impact from COVID-19 and what that means for not just us as a society and our states and our local economies, but to us personally, right? I mean, it affects all of us. You may have had COVID, a family member may have had, you may have a death in the family. And we recognize that, of course, that's an extreme part of the tragedy that we're all experiencing, as well as the economic output or economic impact, as well as impact to how we're working. So with all due respect to the personal impact to all of us, some really kind of tremendous things are happening. And I take the attitude of even in times of great challenge, there's often great opportunity. And that's the theme of hope through all of this as well. We're bombarded with all kinds of news and information about how many cases there have been. This number's out of date. It's in the 90s. And I think I just updated it late last week. And unemployment numbers, we just heard new numbers today, pushing it up to 39 million. Gosh, what a tremendously large number, something we've never seen before. So we've all entered some really not just unfamiliar, but drastically different times than what we've experienced before. And we don't know, are things going to rebound quickly or are things going to take some time to resolve? It's probably the latter, but even with that, what does it look like? One of my pleasurable parts of my job is to really look at how in technology is not only impacting, but enabling what we do in our businesses and the products and services that we provide. And I think all of us have experienced, of course, the swing over to Zoom and Team and all of the online meeting applications and spending our life in front of a computer instead of in meeting rooms for most of us. But also we've seen businesses quickly respond, quickly respond. I have an example of Target up here. There was a point just right after we moved to the work from home, stay at home orders. And because of some work I was doing on some video, we were building a computer for that, and I couldn't order one from Dell, frankly, because there were just delays. There were more important things like masks and PPE and things like that being shipped. Interestingly enough, I was able to build a computer just shopping online, and with curbside delivery. This is before most businesses were doing it with Best Buy. Now, I'm not doing an advertisement with Best Buy, but just to point out, they very quickly modified not just their business process, but their online app, their email response and interaction with you as a customer when you drive up and you click on the link and show your QR code to pick up your product. Now, we've all probably experienced the entire move to take home, pickup, and delivery for food. Those are just a few examples. There have been some other really fascinating things happening on a macro basis that you don't typically see. For example, Rolls-Royce formed a consortium of companies in the manufacturing, in the aerospace manufacturing industry to share data that's been anonymized and desensitized. But that data to share it across regions, globally and across regions, to be able to understand what the economic impact and recovery of different economies are. If you're a global company, the US may recover in one pattern, but you may have business in half a dozen or more different countries across the globe, and those more than likely are going to have much different return rates of how quickly they respond. If we have a reoccurrence of shutdown or stay at home, who knows what's going to happen, but we know it probably won't happen evenly across those economies. So if we talk about disruption in our industry, this is certainly a disruption on a scale none of us have seen, and isn't really in any of our control either. It's not like a competitor entered one of our markets and is being extremely disruptive to our business and being in challenging our competitiveness. it's disrupted everyone, which means we'll probably see some pretty big changes coming out of all of this as well. So I think some of the things, I use this model of disruption, innovation, acceleration. That tends to be the pattern of something occurs, someone enters the market and it offers a new kinds of service, a new way, whatever it might be. Innovation occurs to respond to that or to accelerate and or to accelerate through it. So contactless services, cyber threats, of course, we have lots of new things on the horizon or that are already happening now because of COVID-related cyber attacks. Even texting is a huge method now that we've seen. Getting notices from attackers that are sending COVID-like or contact such and so because you may have a health issue or you need to talk to your doctor and it's someone attacking, trying to get personal information, et cetera. Of course, in economic challenging times, when there's disruption to businesses, supply chains can also be one of the biggest things to rebuild. And frankly, not just rebuild the way they were, probably establish some new form of how they're built. When we went through the 2008 economic crisis from the housing crisis, one of the challenges that came up both with that and the 2001 9/11 situation is major companies like Cisco really rethought how their supply chain would work. And rather than being dependent upon a few manufacturers for specific things, they recrafted their supply chain strategy so that they could go to a number of manufacturers and any one of those could manufacture different products, giving them much more flexibility and resiliency. So those are kind of innovations and acceleration through a rebound or through moving through a economic downturn that I expect we'll continue to see, and some innovations we don't expect. Nobody could have predicted. I think what's challenging also in this situation, given that it's a health-driven health crisis, and we're dealing with personal safety here, that changes behaviors too, especially of our employees, our customers, all of us really. And we may have rolling cycles of some outbreaks, maybe on a small, maybe on a larger basis. Of course, we have all the social measures that we do around reducing contact, people being concerned to return to businesses like theaters and restaurants, or maybe not. Maybe those things will shift to help people feel more comfortable. And again, local and global dynamics of how all this occurs. There's just you could pick any number of examples of changes we've already seen, whether it's the state of California university system changing to all virtual in the fall. Not all folks have done that. Notre Dame has a different strategy. We've certainly, the airlines are a big topic. How does that return? What changes they're having to make? And we're already seeing AI algorithms changing so that they open up middle seats and also distribute passengers on planes. We've talked about curbside delivery. Large venues where there's in places where there's congregation of large groups of people bring particular challenges. And I know our sports franchises and organizations are all trying to figure out how they can return into some form of delivering their products and services to the market. Of course, we're also worried now, even more so than not just a clean restaurant, but what is this organization or this company doing to sanitize the environment so that we are not at risk at contracting the COVID virus. So a new phrase a lot of us have used is new normal. What's the new normal going to be? Are we going to return to what it was? Probably not. There's going to be some form of a new normal. I tend to think of it, and one of the analysts at Accelerated Strategies Group shared with me was this idea of next normal. It's probably a series of reestablishing what that next normal looks like. We gain some familiarity, then we're going to have some change. So let's almost be prepared, just like there may be rolling recoveries or outbreaks, we may also have kind of a rolling next normal type process. So how does this all apply to our industry in IT? It's interesting, during a downturn, we're seeing the number of job openings for software developers are on the increase. They're looking for technology people. Why? Because companies have moved to a digital strategy. They're in the process of going through this digital transformation. Maybe they're early, maybe they're very well down the path. And frankly, the more investment that's been made in digital transformation, the ability to create software, create digital experiences, the ability to leverage data that is created through all kinds of means, interactions with customers, operations, and how that occurs, supply chains, all kinds of things. That may be a very substantial competitive advantage for organizations that can take advantage of that, of course. Now, we do have cutbacks, we do have cost structure changes, and that's certainly something that can affect a lot of people, even to their employment from that standpoint. But we'll also see changes in business models. It was an example of a firm that was in the food delivery service to wholesalers and shifted from a B2B to a B2C because of the situation with downturn in business and businesses shutting down. It may be a permanent change for them. So we'll see some pretty big changes as well as some fine tuning to what we're doing. Now, I think, of course, this is an opportunity to innovate. Anytime we have disruption, we kind of throw up the assumptions, throw them up on the board, erase them. What are the new assumptions? What has changed? How does that affect customer behavior, our business opportunity, how we may operate, our competitors, our marketplace, et cetera? All of that is right platform for us to innovate. Our topic today was about, of course, about mainframes and DevOps and the digital recovery. We'll host some more about this. And we're not just talking about mainframes, but it's interesting that I started my career in the mainframe environment some number of years ago. You can probably tell from my gray hair. But that's still prevalent today. It's still a major factor in how businesses operate, especially businesses in the Fortune 1000 that have been around a while, built through a time of mainframe technology, went through client server, moved into the cloud, et cetera. And I mentioned things like the data that's contained in those systems. Huge, vast amounts of data are not only processed, but maintained on mainframe systems. And we've gotten into a world where those are no longer standalone mainframe systems and applications, but really need to and are being integrated into a larger economy of applications, of systems, cloud, public and private, integration through APIs and other services that we use to interoperate between applications. So mainframe technology is kind of standalone, leaving it back in the corner, if you will, being systems that may be older, less happening with them. Frankly, more and more is being done with those applications because they're vital to financial services, to healthcare, to manufacturing, to a number of industries. And if you've started your business in the last 10 or 20 years, maybe you don't have mainframes, but I'll bet there's suppliers in your supply chain, manufacturers that are highly dependent upon those technologies and is an important part of their strategy. So the message here is, don't set aside, let's think about and let's move how we interact, how we create software, how that software is integrated and leveraged with other systems and applications that are all part of our overall technology strategy, the part of our digital transformation and how we deliver services to our customers. So with that, I'm going to switch over slides here, if you pardon me just for a moment, and turn things over to Jeff. So let me share this other slide presentation. Jeff, are you ready to take things?
I am, Mitch. Thank you very much. And thank you for setting the stage. We're all experiencing things that I don't believe anyone has ever experienced in the modern age around the pandemic. Certainly, everything that we're engaging with has to take that into account. And we're delighted to have this opportunity to speak to your audience, Mitch, knowing that they are a DevOps-centric, DevOps-familiar, DevOps-educated audience. We do have a lot of conversations around the world with our hundreds of customers, some of whom are well along on their DevOps journeys and some who are just starting. And we'll talk to a couple of things briefly in this session about where we at ASG are working with our customers to enhance their DevOps results. I will encourage anyone, as we're talking through here, we do invite questions in the questions pane or in the chat pane. Feel free to ping something out. While I'm speaking, Anna and Mitch will be monitoring that, and we'll trade hats as I turn this over to Anna a little bit later in in the discussion. So on screen, you see something that may be somewhat familiar to you. This is a typical DevOps architecture, and full transparency. This reflects at least the point in time of a few months ago, what we had adopted for DevOps here within ASG. You see a lot of the familiar players. We see Git, we see Jenkins, we see all the sorts of tools that are typical. And this is a typical sort of arrangement, configuration of the tools required to have an effective DevOps workflow. And what we find working with our customers is that coordinating all the tools in the tool chain is a place where they've got some particular challenges. And we do have a particular way that we think we can help them with that. If we could go to the next slide, please, Mitch. It starts with the idea of value stream. And if you've not run across value stream, it's sort of self-defining. It is that sequence of things that need to occur from the time that something is asked for to the time something is delivered. It is the stream of activity that delivers value to your customers. It's a concept that came to us from the lean manufacturing movement, got adopted very quickly. You see it used in the jargon for the scaled agile framework, and that particular framework for agile. And Mitch, I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback hearing myself. Maybe if you could go on mute, Mitch, that would help.
You bet. Apologies
Thank
for that.
you. That's quite all right. If it's distracting me, I was afraid it might be distracting others. And at the end of the day, so technology has adopted the same sort of idea that if we marshal our resources in our development sequence so that we're approaching the technology enablement of the business in the same way that our business leaders who fund our IT activities are managing the business, we're going to get much closer alignment. If we are managing the technology as an end-to-end value stream, then we get the same sorts of postures within what we do as the line of business leaders. And so as a consequence then, if we can go to the next slide. Please, Mitch. There we go. We have to take into account what our starting place is. That last illustration obviously was something simplified to help us make a point, and the illustration you see here may be a little bit magnified to illustrate the point that almost every situation we walk into, we walk into with some legacy, with some ways of doing business that had been in place in the enterprise for some period of time. And while the value streams may be very cleanly envisioned by the line of business leaders, whether it is the delivery of a shop floor order and the sequence of manufacturing, if it is a order fulfillment to provide the logistics to deliver goods to a customer, whatever it may be, when we get into the actual details of implementation, we find the sort of organic aggregation of both technology and then the informal processes that surround it to actually make that process operate. The sneaker net, the emails back and forth, the tribal knowledge that may be represented in scripting that has been written by someone at a point in time, but then not ever fully documented, certainly not code documented, and gosh forbid when that person moves on to their next opportunity or their next point in life, the script lives on, but is both hidden and is not necessarily well understood about why it's there or what it's doing. And so as we think about DevOps and the management of the DevOps flow here at ASG, working with our customers, one of the things that came forward is the need to be able to coordinate the DevOps activity across all of the technology silos that are needed so things like those scripts become both captured and warehoused and appropriately available for examination when they're needed. The reliance on informal email exchanges or the sneaker net transfer of information from one technology to a silo declines. If we could have the next slide, please, Mitch. And that led to the offering of ASG Enterprise Orchestrator. Those of you who may know ASG, or by its predecessor company name, Allen Systems Group, you know we have a deep history in workload automation. We're a premier provider for those needs to enterprises around the world. We built on that then to provide the capabilities to coordinate the activity of development of any sort of technology aligned with the value stream across all of the different silos that value stream may touch. Certainly, we have a history with mainframe applications, as you've heard Mitch mention about the importance of mainframe, but we have equal competencies across all the other technology silos you may be working with, whether that is traditional two-tier client server, multi-tier client server, cloud offerings, whether that's public, private, or hybrid. And as a consequence, the capabilities we have developed over many years for workload management can also apply to the application release automation you need to do with your DevOps tools, and has that additional value of being able to include and embrace the mainframe activity that's necessary to provide the capabilities those value streams require. This is an area that we can talk to and talk exhaustively. We could consume the entire webinar that we've got before us with just this, but I do encourage you, please submit questions if you have anything you'd like to expand on around this, or talk to us afterwards. We're happy to do that and to go into more detail. I do want to talk a bit, though, about the importance of what we're considering here in the context of the pandemic. Every organization is needing to take a different assessment of their tolerance for risk. Some of you may hear us talk about mainframe and say, you know, gosh, that is such legacy technology. It's been around for so long. Any enterprise in the world must be thinking about moving their workloads completely off mainframe and onto other platforms, cloud platforms, even in-house multi-tier client server. And certainly many were, and just as many were still finding that they had so much value presented to them in the mainframe, they weren't looking to move off, but they were looking to move it into their overall value stream automation strategies. Now, with the advent of the pandemic, as customers are looking at, enterprises are looking at their toleration for risk, many are beginning to reconsider any initiatives they had to move off mainframe, because that introduces so much risk into the environment. It is a big bang, high risk sort of exercise to shut down a transaction processing system on the mainframe that's been doing the work that's been needed for decades and doing it well, to move to something completely brand new. So we do find our customers are approaching us and saying, we do want to be able to take the value that we're getting from DevOps. We want to be able to include our mainframe offerings in those DevOps capabilities. And if you'll go to the next slide, please. Mitch? If we could go to the next slide, please, Mitch. There we go.
It's just
they're wanting to be able
to for my Mac and GoToWebinar.
Right. We did have a question pop up, Jeff. It's a very interesting one. I don't know if you want to take it now or after you talk about it.
Well, let me complete the thought, and then I'm going to grab that question. Okay. So what we're talking to you about today, as DevOps professionals, is that you should be considering marshaling your DevOps development activity around the value streams that align with what your business leaders are doing, and you should be including mainframe in those considerations. So Anna, what is the question? It'll probably take me a moment to scroll and find the right place
I'll
to see.
ask it for Adi. They say, "Hi Jeff, I've been involved in helping enterprises in Europe with the adoption of DevOps practices on the mainframes over the last 5 years, and it has been a struggle to convince leadership on the value and need for modern engineering practices on the mainframe as part of their technical stack. Do you think we have reached a tipping point in terms of adoption of DevOps practices on the mainframe?"
You know, I'll start on that, and then it'll actually bridge nicely into the conversation Anna's here to provide. I do think that we are seeing an inflection in the curve around that. We've got customers who are approaching us that are large-scale enterprises who have made investments in DevOps and have come to the realization that they've got to include their mainframe operations. At the end of the day, there are very few enterprises, and certainly very few large-scale enterprises, that don't have a heterogeneous technology environment. And many of them continue to have strong reliance on mainframe for mission-essential operations, whether it's transaction processing around payments, it is the orchestration and delivery of their ERP capabilities. Mainframe remains part of what they do, and excluding mainframe is really minimizing the value that they can get from their DevOps investments overall. But at that point, I'm actually going to turn it over to Anna, and Anna's going to lead to a conversation about where we do see enterprises who are reaching out and saying, we need to have mainframe included in what we do. Anna, over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Mitch, if you'll go to the next slide. Right, so, you talk about slower adoption and why is mainframe slow to the party, right? There's some significant challenges in the mainframe world, not the least of which is that changing workforce, right? We've got older skilled workers retiring, right? And I'm in the middle generation there. So we had a bunch of baby boomers that got skilled up on the mainframe. And then there was the next generation, which I fall into, that was told, oh, the mainframe's dying. So we pretty much ignored the mainframe for a while, I must admit. And then the next generation came along and we realized, wait a minute, the mainframe's not going anywhere, but we have a gap in skill, right? And so we have brand new generation coming on where there's a lot of energy around education for these new workers, but there's still that gap in the workforce, right? And so there's got to be mentorship and bringing those people together so that we get a stronger skilled workforce there again. The next thing is that DevOps is becoming a standard practice. And as companies go down that road, they realize how critical their mainframe is, and they need to bring DevOps in mainframe together. And their end users are expecting more agile responses, right? And if they don't become more agile, then they can't respond to the end users and they fall behind in business. And so DevOps helps enable that agility, right? There's a whole bunch of things that come together to make DevOps happen. But it is driving organizations to focus on the tools that they use to manage mainframe operations, looking now for modern approaches with centralized user interfaces to attract that new generation of developer. And these new approaches include APIs for integration within the overall environment, and those APIs are on the mainframe just as much as they're anywhere else. Okay, Mitch, the next slide, please. So let's talk about JCL. That's really a very important piece of the mainframe, right? If you have an IBM mainframe, you are running JCL. It is the language that runs the mainframe, right? So it's not so much a language as a scripting tool, but we're not going to get into that very much. But there's companies, so you've got JCL, you're running multiple logical partitions, right, LPARs, and it runs on every LPAR, on every mainframe. Then there's more complexity there, right? So there's development areas, there's testing, there's user acceptance testing and production. And then that all has to happen in parallel. And we want DevOps, right? We want it all connected and running all the time, right? And continuous integration, continuous delivery. It's really complicated. So the other part that adds in, people have tried to control it with schedulers, and I've found that many companies are automating JCL with multiple scheduling engines. So then you have more complexity on top of that, right? And we still have traditional developers using that 3270 green screen. They're not really interested in moving to DevOps as much because they're really skilled with that keyboard and the keyboard shortcuts. So, this is the environment that we're looking at. Mitch, let's go to the next slide. Get a little better picture of all the moving parts. I talked about all the different environments. If you look at this diagram, it's a little complicated, but if you start at the top right-hand side, you're in production, right? And that's where we know we have good, strong running JCL. And then when you're ready to make a change, we have to update, and you move across to the left, across the top, and you export it out of the lifecycle manager, and then you have to transform it to work in that development environment. And there's reformatting and validation to make sure now it's going to work in development. And then we say, okay, ready to test. So now we've got to move it into the test environment and transform it again, because there's variables and things that different files that you have to access and things when you move across LPARs or different systems. And you just repeat the process again into user acceptance testing. And then finally, you can promote it back into production. And so this is the process that if you have, those developers, the skilled ones, and the new guys who are coming in and learning, doing all these changes manually, well, there's a lot of room for error, really, right? We're human after all. So, Mitch, the next slide, please. So I want to talk to you a little bit about our approach to JCL management in the DevOps toolchain. And it really begins with our integration with Eclipse. Over the past year, our field engineers have been asking our customers if they have DevOps initiatives. And a lot of them are saying yes. And one of us told them, we said, are you running Topaz or IBM IDZ? And they said, hey, actually, we're running both. The only one that didn't tell us that was intrigued by the idea of just a plain standard Eclipse plugin, because they want those younger generation of developers to be empowered to work in an environment that they're comfortable in. So a newer generation of developers uses Eclipse for Java development and all kinds of different other development activities. And so we built our plugin to run on standard Eclipse. It also integrates with CompuWare Topaz, and within the next 3 months, it's going to integrate with IBM IDZ. And the next stage there, you're looking at in the center, our ASG Pro JCL is installed on the mainframe, and it's a very powerful JCL management solution. And with it comes a RESTful web service. And we talk to that RESTful web service from the Eclipse plugin so that there's a standardized interface. And that leads to that next benefit. And it connects then with your CI/CD solutions or your continuous integration, continuous delivery. And Jeff mentioned ASG Enterprise Orchestrator. It's one of those tools that you can integrate with, but we use Jenkins also. There's other solutions, right, that you can use. And the beautiful thing about RESTful web services, as you guys probably know, because you've used them with other products, is that they're standardized, right? And we can connect and execute the same thing. And so as we improve our solution, improve the things we want to do from our Eclipse interface, you also have connectivity into the very same functionality from your CI/CD solution. And Mitch, I think we have a quick poll question we can put out there. I'm interested in this crowd. How many of you guys are running these kind of solutions? IBM IDZ, Topaz, or both? Oh, that's the other poll question. We can go back, I guess.
My bad.
Well, why don't we
Let's
go,
ask it.
Anna, why don't we go ahead and capture this question here?
Yeah, let's do
it. Could. So we do want to ask a little bit of insight from you in the audience. We're very happy that you folks have shared time with us. One of the things we'd like to know as we're talking to you is how well or to what degree mainframe is being considered within your enterprise DevOps practice. You have 5 answers there, and is the poll active now, Mitch?
Yes, it is. Yep. And we're getting responses.
Okay.
Yeah, about a quarter of our
Great.
audience, a little more, have responded. We'd love to get half of the folks jump in. Easy thing to answer. Just select one of them and press submit. And we still got them coming in.
Good. So we do want to know, of the folks who have joined us here today, how many of you do have a mainframe in your enterprise technology mix? And if you do have mainframe, where it is in terms of the DevOps adoption. It may be that you're fully integrated, and we do know that there are some shops out there that have been very early adopters of DevOps, both as a discipline itself and then by extension DevOps with mainframe. But there are others that are still very early in the curve. So Mitch, how are we doing in terms of our response rates?
Doing real well. We're almost half the folks have responded. That's usually a good cutoff point. How about if I close the poll and we'll look at the results?
Let's do.
There we go. So
and actually, this distribution looks very common. This looks very common. There are still hundreds and actually thousands of enterprises out there that use mainframe, but we understand that not all do, and many maybe have started in the last few years or don't have particular business models that require it. But of those that we do, this looks like a very common distribution where there's a few that have not started to include mainframe in their DevOps, and then there are a few those leading edge early adopters who have got it fully integrated in their DevOps practice. Thank you. We appreciate that response. Anna, were you going to bring forward your polling question now?
Yes, so Mitch, that was the question about Eclipse interfaces that these customers might be running. And, whether you're mainframe or not, it's actually very interested to see whether you're using Eclipse. Are you using IDZ if you're a mainframe shop? CompuWare Topaz, this is multiple choice. And you may not know, and that's okay too. That's why we give you an I don't know answer.
Great, we're getting some votes in. It's an interesting question, while we're taking this poll on, I'm curious if you've seen this. We seem to be making a shift, generally speaking, not just speaking of the mainframe environment, where we give developers a lot more flexibility in the choice of the tools that they use, sometimes even the software stack that's used, whether they add open source or different integration tools for CI/CD, whatever it might be. And I'm curious, is that something that you see occurring more frequently in the mainframe development teams that you interface with?
Jeff may have a little more experience in that area, but I would say what I'm seeing more of is standardization, right? There's wide use of the 3270 green screen, of course, because that's just been there for so long. But this growing need to provide a more standardized interface off of the mainframe. But the standards on the mainframe are so consistent, right? It's been there and successful for so long. People are used to working with it a certain way. And so finding, other tools, there's a lot of mainframe software providers and there's different solutions, but, mainframe software is pretty expensive. And, so they tend to, as a company, choose solutions and get everybody trained up on them.
Makes a lot of sense.
What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, a couple of things that we've heard from the folks we work with is, while they do want to give the developers enough range and latitude that they can be effective and efficient, they do want to focus on the efficiency. And that's one of the reasons why there is a focus on getting capabilities into an integrated development environment and getting into a common work method. If the IDE allows the user to switch seamlessly between working with the job control language they need to initiate work on the mainframe for the aspect of a value stream that requires mainframe, and from that same user experience then move on to working with the Java code that they may deploy on the mainframe, which supports a JVM just like any other server, or on a Unix server, or on a Windows server, that they actually get tremendous upside from allowing that user to remain in context, that developer to remain in context. There's a lot of research that has been shared with us by our customers around the cost of switching attention switching. If we can keep the developer in that good state of concentration, they get much more productive for a longer period of time than if they have to step away from the IDE where they're doing their distributed systems work and go to a mainframe classical interface to do their mainframe work. So what do we see here from the polling results?
Yeah, it looks like 33% are saying Eclipse, a third of the audience. That's a good indication of some, concentration of use. Anna, what are your thoughts on looking at the distribution here?
No, it's really interesting, and I'm not surprised that half the audience doesn't know. That's not what everybody knows. This is more the developer level, and if you're managing developers and know what they're using to be productive. So that's not surprising to me either. But the distribution between Topaz and IDZ is interesting too, and a stronger use of IDZ, and not surprising. But we are seeing that there's different companies. I'd be interested to see how many of those were double answer. We'll have to come back to them later to see who are using both, because I'm seeing that happen a lot too. So interesting answer. It's good.
We don't get quite that flexibility to look at those great kind of questions. If we're looking at Excel, we could do that.
Right. All right, so you can go to the next slide, and we'll talk about a customer story that we have. And I can't use their name, of course, but it is a major credit card processor, and their story really is that they had chosen to standardize on CompuWare Topaz, and the company made a major investment in CompuWare solutions, and they're trying to get all of their developers to adopt the Topaz environment. And one of the first things their developers asked them when they started using Topaz was, okay, how do I scan my JCL? And because they've been actually using one of our other JCL management solutions for a long time, and that's their unit testing software, really, is what it comes down to. Is they make their changes to the JCL and they run a quick scan to make sure it's standardized and everything's going to work and it's going to resolve variables with a scheduler, and there's a lot of moving parts. And when the answer was no, you got to go back to your 3270 green screen for that, they said, I don't need to use Topaz. I'll go back to the 3270. I like it just fine, right? And so, they came to us and said, it's time. We need an Eclipse plugin, and we need something compatible with Topaz. And we took that challenge and brought it to life. And now they're engaging with it and adopting Topaz, and that's what they want to see in their environment. And that helps their experienced developers talk with their younger developers and communicate at the same level, and really start to transfer knowledge, right? And I love this quote from them. It says, our developers love the remote scanning feature that ProJCL provides. This is actually something that doesn't have much to do with the Eclipse plugin we're talking about, although you can do remote scanning from the Eclipse plugin. But it opens doors to maximize their mainframe DevOps tooling by allowing developers to validate their JCL from within one interface. So for them, it was about centralizing the use and standardizing in one place and keeping people from context switching, as Jeff just mentioned. And so they're happy, and of course we're happy too that they're happy. And so it's a great story. And we have other customers who are looking to convert off of older JCL management solutions to a more modern solution like ProJCL because they want that DevOps interface. And one of the next steps that this customer is going to take is integrating with Jenkins so that they can have their CI/CD solutions and their pipeline move everything over and get the scanning built right in with it. So it's really interesting taking this journey together with them.
And that just sort of leads back to a couple of threads we introduced earlier when I believe you said it was Avi from Europe asked the question about how to promote the case for including mainframe in the DevOps practices. This is one of the things that I think you can point to is to point to the best practice that's being adopted by significant enterprises around the world. Certainly you can come to our website. This case study would be available. We have others available there. Certainly you can also point them toward the blogs that we publish on this topic area. And we are publishing frequently here as we share our experiences with our customers in both their use of the ProJCL DevOps enablement through Eclipse. And we talk to the other aspect that I bring forward, which is the need for a mainframe inclusive application release automation capability in the coordination of the tool chain. The idea that JCL is placed into Jenkins for source code management is an example of where our enterprise orchestrator has the capabilities to bridge that gap between the mainframe and the non-mainframe parts of the world. So with that, Mitch, I don't know, do we have some other questions that have come in that we want to turn our attention to?
Yeah, we do. We definitely do. Some great questions here. One of the questions that comes from Jim, he's asking about, the disciplines from the mainframe environment, the protection, change. I think he's talking about change control, migration, deployment, et cetera, that have never been developed in distributed computing. I think we could say that has, but maybe a little bit differently. What have you seen in DevOps distributed to bridge this gap? Maybe I'll start this out with just teeing up the conversation. I think there's a bit of a doing the same thing with a different approach. A lot of it's driven by if you're creating software through agile means where you're doing things in much smaller chunks, you're starting to migrate smaller pieces of change into production. The need for something like a change control board, which would be very typical in a mainframe environment, is less so because you're interactively working with the product team, with the development team, and you're using other tools to do migration and deployment. So I think it's not that it isn't done. Maybe some of the same good things are being done. Maybe they just didn't learn the lessons from the mainframe environment to get shared in that. I don't know, what are your thoughts? Do either of you think that's true, or you have a different perspective about it?
Well, I think it's an extension of what you say. Certainly I can share a certain amount of the experience that Jim may be reflecting in the question, in that there's been a tradition that we do our source code management in and only in the platform of development. So my experience may reflect Jim's, where CA Endeavor or ASG Lifecycle Manager was what we use to manage our mainframe source code, and that's effective and it's good. Where we are seeing changes and changes in a slightly different direction is to ensure that as the source code for a particular technology silo is being archived, it's being archived in context of all of the other source code for all of the other technology that's required for the end-to-end value stream. I wish I could, off the top of my head, remember which author or poet is credited with "No man is an island." Well, it's certainly come to the point where no technology is an island, right. And so we do see more and more desire to ensure that the source code for mainframe is being stored in a way that it can be recovered and can be kept in context with all of the other application versions or technology that's required for the end-to-end process, and not just the technology silo vertical process on the mainframe.
Right, and I think just add that solutions like ASG Enterprise Orchestrator, that's its purpose and existence really is to help bridge those gaps and bring them together, and because it can automate stuff on the mainframe, and maybe it's going to bring that code over to your Git location, right? It's going to automate all of those things. And so the RESTful web services, it's just like from the JCL perspective, if we commit JCL into Git, then we need to scan it, but we need to scan it from Jenkins or from AEO, or it's all moving parts, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's the advancement of all the technologies, right? We have a part to play, and other vendors have other parts to play, but we have to elevate it so that we can all talk together, right? And some of that is that RESTful web service, and there's other ways to all work together. But AEO is a great well, we call it ASG Enterprise Orchestrator because that's what it does. It orchestrates across all of those silos, and helps to simplify the very complex, as Jeff's slide showed how complex it can be.
And as I take off my mainframe hat, where I'm looking to identify with Jim and his context, and perhaps put on my DevOps hat to identify with Avi and some of his context, we do invite you, come to the website. There are a number of different webinars and a number of different resources that expands on things that I have to believe that you DevOps professionals are wondering about, such as how does Enterprise Orchestrator manipulate containers? How does it integrate with fill in the blank with your favorite DevOps tool in the tool chain and so forth? A lot more information there, and we'd certainly be happy to share that with you, or to talk with you about the particular things you're trying to accomplish in your enterprise.
Excellent. One of the folks also asked about Zoe, the open mainframe project, open source project. Any thoughts on that and how that fits into this kind of ecosystem of tools?
It's a genuinely interesting question. We are certainly looking to join the Zoe open mainframe movement. If you're not familiar with it, it's something that I believe is endorsed, if not sponsored, by IBM, that looks to make sure that the capabilities of the mainframe are exposed through APIs that can integrate more gracefully with the distributed and cloud offerings. We're looking through the steps necessary now to make the capabilities that Anna and her team have delivered for ProJCL to the Eclipse plugin via API integration available to Zoe. They do have some standards that we need to apply before we would qualify, but I think you'll see us out there very soon. And it goes back to some of the themes that we opened this conversation with. The mainframe continues to be critical, and actually now, during the time of pandemic, it is probably going to persist longer within enterprises than that might have prior to the pandemic, simply because enterprises don't want to take on that additional risk of migration. And as a consequence, the idea of ensuring that it is a fully participating member in the larger enterprise integration scheme is critical to success. We're investing in that. You're going to find the other vendors in this space are investing in it, and clearly IBM's investing in it. And we actually go out on a limb and believe that you'll see a renewed vitality around mainframe processing because of the fact that it is both the most reliable and most available platform on which you can deliver any technology, and I'll defend that. And you're seeing IBM and we in the software community doing things to make it both economically and commercially more attractive than perhaps it was in prior periods.
Excellent. Next one would be a good question for you, Anna. JCL system exits can be coded to enforce JCL standards. Can that be cross-pollinated to the distributed environment? Your thoughts on that?
I've been reading and rereading that question, wondering if Jim might expand on that question. What does he mean by cross-pollination? I mean, that's Jim. If you could give us a little bit more of what you're talking about, I'm very interested to hear what you mean by that.
Yeah, I was wondering, is that about distributed work teams, distributed applications? What Jim might be referring to?
I think he's raising his hand.
Good question.
I don't know.
While we're getting some feedback from Jim, kind of a rather long question here, but it says, I discovered several years ago while working on a project on one of the largest automobile and logistic group in the UK that Java EE Enterprise Edition remote method invocation works fine on the mainframe if installed correctly to offer agile DevOps objectives. As this was not part of our original standard Eclipse implementation, and we'll appreciate your views on this. I don't know if you've heard of that being done before, either of you, or any thoughts on that?
You know, that's a question that demands I think a more extensive answer than we've got time left. What we'll do is we'll commit to record these questions, and we'll follow up to the community with responses. You know, the thing that I'll say is I've worked in and around mainframe long enough that I remember the times before it had any sort of a virtual machine available. And now with the most recent releases of the IBM operating system last September, and with the capabilities that are available with the newest hardware, the Z15s, you do find that that IBM does deliver a fully Java compliant environment. And it comes back to the same phrase that I heard in that question on mainframe as it does on distributed or cloud: an appropriately configured Java environment. Java being Java, it gives a lot of flexibility, and the ways to misconfigure it are at least as numerous as the ways to configure it properly.
Mm-hmm. Lots of opportunity there either way.
Yeah.
Great.
With that, unfortunately, I'm going to have to say I need to break away. I've got another call here at the top of the hour, Mitch.
Yep. So we just want to wrap up. Thank you, both of you, Anna and Jeff, for your excellent presentations, discussions, questions.
Namaste.
We also want to let folks know that our two Amazon winners, Amazon gift cards, are Joe G and Vanessa H. So thank you on behalf of the entire team here.
Yes.
Yeah, congratulations to them. And thank you to you folks at the ASG Technologies for this engaging conversation. And thanks, of course, to our audience. Your time's super valuable, and that you spent an hour of it with us we appreciate that. We're honored that you did that. So
Very much
be safe, be well, have a good day.
Yes.
Cheers,
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jane Grohl, CEO of the DevOps Institute. Some of you may know me. I did some of the segments for TechStrong TV as a lead up to the TechStrong conference, which was awesome. Well, now I'd like to introduce you to my new series known as Jane Explains. The tech space is moving so fast. The terminology, the applications, the environments, the strategies, the frameworks are accelerating faster than ever before. I'm an old IT director. I managed operations and particularly service desk for a very, very long period of time. And just being able to keep pace with things that have been happening over the last, say, 5 or 6 years has just definitely been a quest. And I'd like to bring some of that to you because, again, it's really challenging unless you're staying on top of all of the changes to be able to understand what's happening and more importantly, I think, why. I'm not the most technical person on the block, so I don't think I'll be tackling too many of the programming languages or other deep technologies, but maybe I'll invite a friend or a colleague to join me who can explain that further. So Jane Explains starts in a couple of weeks. If you have topics that you're interested in, please reach out. Happy to do that. And while you're at it, go up to the DevOps Institute website, www.devopsinstitute.com. Become a member. We have some videos up there known as Skill Up Minutes that may also help you set your learning journey on course. So stay tuned. Jane Explains, coming soon.
Next up, we're going to head over to Mike Vizard, who usually, as you know, does our channel roundup. Mike's guest today is RJ Jahandra, and if I mispronounce it, I apologize. RJ is president and general manager of DevOps and IT business management at ServiceNow. They've recently made an acquisition in the DevOps space as well. And Mike has all the scoop on it. So let's now head over to Mike Vizard with RJ Jahandra of ServiceNow.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, thanks, guys. We're here with RJ Jahandra, who's the Vice President and General Manager for IT, Business Management, and DevOps at ServiceNow, and we're talking about a new acquisition they just made of a company called Swaggle. RJ, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. It's really good to be here.
So what exactly is a Swaggle, and why do I need it, and why are you getting into configuration management in the first place?
So, Mike, we're acquiring Swaggle to strengthen the IT workflow capabilities that we have here at ServiceNow to help our customers accelerating their digital transformation. And so, the past few months have really shown companies the importance of agility and quickly adapting technology to meet their customer and employee needs. And companies that rely on old manual ways of managing their applications are under pressure to adopt modern cloud architectures and DevOps practices, things like microservices, serverless computing, etc. And so, when customers move into these types of modern architectures and platforms, it really requires them to start managing a new kind of information, namely configuration data that influences how the applications and infrastructure behave. And so Sweegle is a Belgian-based company that are pioneers in the space around configuration data management. And we believe that by partnering with them, bring them into ServiceNow, we'll be able to accelerate how we can help our customers who are moving into the cloud, into these new architectures.
Gotcha. There's a lot of people out there who offer something that feels like configuration management tools. So how is this different from what I might see with any number of them that are out there, Puppet, Chef, or something else that people associate in this category? Is there segmentation here, or what's going on?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are a number of configuration management products out in the market, starting from way back when with CF Engine, and then Chef and Puppet and Ansible and so on. So the thing about what Sweegle does that's differentiated is no matter where configuration data is. So these configuration management products, they all tend to store configurations in different places, right? So whether they may be files that are stored in Git, repos, or they may be config files stored elsewhere. So what Sweegle does is it brings and collects all of these configurations into a single repository, right, and brings it under management, so that in terms of security, who can make changes, providing that traceability, etc. And they do this not only from across the lifecycle, so they do this across dev, test, production instances. And so customers are able to have one place where they can go look at a particular configuration, how it's represented across the lifecycle, and then be able to apply validations on it, right? So for example, what's the right setting for a production environment may be very different from what's being used in a development or test environment. So they're able to build validations for these different configuration data elements and then apply those policies as the applications are being deployed into environments. And so in that sense, Sweegle works in conjunction with configuration management tools. So the integrations between Sweegle and configuration management tools like Ansible, where prior to a deployment, Ansible can call into Sweegle as that source of truth as to what are the right settings that should be applied in a particular environment.
And at least in my experience, there's a lot of people who are using these various tools to automatically configure whatever it is, infrastructure in AWS and Azure. But a lot of mistakes seem to be getting made, and a lot of the security issues seem to come right back to those files that someone created to automate the configuration. So is this a way to finally maybe address that in a way that makes some sense or bring some order to the chaos?
That's exactly right, which is oftentimes there is no central management of these configurations, right? So you may have files that are checked into repos that developers have access to that really shouldn't be making edits to those files because those represent, say, configurations for production. And so Sweegle is finally a solution that brings all of that into a central repository and then applies access control so that customers can start managing all this configuration information in a single place, but at the same time, continue to use the different tools that they leverage to be able to apply those configurations.
Gotcha. I noticed in the press release, you guys made a reference that there was something like 50,000 configuration elements in a single application. Is that the average, or is that just an example of one worst case scenario? And how did that get out of control?
So if you think about modern enterprise applications, right? So think about a banking application. So it is common to have upwards of those numbers, 50,000 upwards configuration, when you consider everything that goes in from that infrastructure level all the way to the application. And there are lots of different kinds of things that you could represent as configurations, right? Whether they be feature flags that determine the behavior of the application, or maybe there are also, say, credentials that are used to establish connectivity between systems, all the way down to things like, say, JVM, heap sizes and log settings. So, configurations run the gamut from infrastructure to the application behavior. So it's not surprising that we can have as many that need to be managed. And then when you think about the delivery process, about going from, say, a test instance to a staging instance to a production instance, you have configurations and specific values that might be set for those different environments, right? So while we like to say that, hey, the DevOps, try and make your testing environments the same as production, in reality, what we find is because of, say, resource constraints, et cetera, the architectures may be slightly different, and the settings for different configurations may be slightly different in a test environment and in production. And so when you consider that complexity, as well as with modern architectures, you think about all the different microservices, all the different components that have to all work together, that really does add up to a lot of different configurations needing to be managed.
Gotcha. Hey, you guys are also talking about something called a service graph, and I'm not entirely familiar with how that works. So walk me through that a little bit.
So the service graph is really an evolution of the CMDB, right? So when customers were working in more traditional architectures, they needed to manage the configurations of those servers, right? So at that point, it was more about the hardware, port settings, and so on that established connectivity between various systems. But as customers move into the cloud with these modern application architectures, now it's no longer just about the hardware and configurations, because those have now been outsourced to your service providers, right? So really what customers now have to deal with are configurations for your infrastructure as service. So if your infrastructure code, so if you're, say, using something like Azure or AWS, you may be representing your infrastructure as configurations, which are basically the whole concept of infrastructure as code checked into your Git repo. Additionally, with modern application architectures, again, you're thinking about all the different configurations that drive the behavior of the application. And so what we realize is that for customers to continue to be able to provide great service for their applications, they need to start managing this new type of information, right? And so the service graph is really the evolution of the CMDB to the next generation, where we can now bring in all of this new information and correlate it and establish the relationships so that we can then help customers prevent outages, as well as when there is a problem to be also quickly be able to remediate that problem. This very much ties into also the idea of things like in a modern environment, things like logging and bringing in other types of information around monitoring, observability all together and tying them all so that, again, customers can very quickly pinpoint the source of problems, maybe even proactively before the problem really manifests itself, to be able to course correct. So the service graph is that next generation CMDB for us.
We've been talking about DevOps for a long time now. And of course, people were talking about ITIL before DevOps. And there's this whole little Venus versus Mars conversation that goes on in the IT services management space. How do you see these two different approaches coming together? Are they going to, have this kumbaya moment, or are we going to agree to disagree, or how will we get along?
So you're right. I mean, there's this huge debate about ITIL and the applicability of ITIL in the world of DevOps. But listen, if you read works from folks like Gene Kim and such, ITIL in itself is not at conflict with DevOps and the need to be able to deliver value quickly, get feedback, and then iterate on that. It's really more about how it has been applied, in that the traditional models have been very onerous and very manual. And so as we think about DevOps, really we think about how do we take the principles around ITIL, but make them fit into the DevOps model, leveraging data and automation for a high level of governance and decision-making. Right? So for example, with our DevOps product that we launched last year, we went from having customers needing to have these manual change advisory boards where people got together and made decisions on whether to allow changes or not. We moved into a model where through integrations, we bring data into ServiceNow and leverage that data for automated decision-making, right, through change policies. And so by doing so, we can still apply that same sort of oversight, that ITIL prescribes in terms of making sure that the changes that are being delivered have been tested properly, they work. But we can do that leveraging automation rather than kind of manual approaches.
So regardless of the model, we're going to see a lot more automation going forward. Do you think that maybe in this post-COVID-19 world, there's a lot more interest in automation? Is that what's going to bring everybody together?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we've seen through COVID is customers that have digitized their processes, which means they are using workflows, they're using automation. They've been able to innovate very quickly and respond to the changing circumstances. And so we definitely see that as a tailwind, and then continuing out in the future, continue to see adoption of automation of these technologies and moving further up the life cycle, right? So not just something that's applied at the tail end when you're talking about deploying into a production environment, but using that automation earlier in the life cycle to catch and fix problems as soon as they occur.
Where do you think AI will fit in this conversation going forward? Do you think we're going to see a lot more of it? Are we already seeing it? We just don't know it's there, or what's going on?
So the best application of AI is, you're exactly right. It's sort of working. You may not even know that you're using it. And so from that perspective, Swigo already uses machine learning. So when you think about configuration data and recognizing what a particular piece of configuration data means, right? So Swigo uses machine learning to be able to identify configuration data. So for example, if it were to read a YAML file, to be able to map that configuration to know that those are settings that may be for your VM on AWS, right? So it uses machine learning to identify the different types of configuration data. And then with that identification, then apply the right policies to be able to make sure that those settings for that data are correct, right? So Swigo already uses machine learning there, as well as when there is a problem that occurs in an environment, again, by bringing in the signals from monitoring tools, again, leveraging machine learning to identify the potential root cause of that problem. Like I said, there are a large number of configuration data items, and to be able to then quickly identify exactly what might be causing a problem, again, that's an application of machine learning. So Swigo does that today, and we can continue to see more and more of those types of usages as we go forward.
Do you think IT is going to get easier to manage or more complex to manage? Every time I turn around, there's a new abstraction somewhere, and it seems like we promised people it would get simpler, but it looks like it's getting harder, or something going to happen here that we don't all see yet.
So I would say, listen, I'm an optimist, and so but then you're right. The complexity is increasing, right? In the sense with new architectures, it does seem that things are harder to manage, but that's really where technologies like Swigo, things that we're doing at ServiceNow, and the automation that we're bringing in, it really starts helping the SRE or the DevOps team be able to work and really can draw the attention to the things that need attention, need their focus, whereas everything else can work via the automation. So I think the good news is that with technologies that are here as well as on the horizon, we do help our customers with management of these newer systems.
All right. And when are we going to see this Swigo stuff embedded into ServiceNow?
So as with the other technologies we bring in, we do re-platform. And so we will be working on that starting now. And then in upcoming releases, you will start seeing Swigo make its way into ServiceNow. And I'd say there's a couple of use cases. One is that preventative use case, which is in the pipeline as part of a deployment using Swigo to identify potential incorrect configurations and preventing that deployment that causes an outage. And then secondly, if there is an incident that happens, leveraging Swigo to quickly identify the root cause as part of our ITOM help. So you can expect that in the coming releases.
All right, great. Hey, RJ, thanks for being on the show.
Mike, it was really nice to speak with you today.
All right, guys, back to you in the studio.
Where does the time go? That was a quick 3 hours, huh? Well, maybe not 3 hours, 2.5 or so. But I hope you enjoyed Thursday's show. We're going to wrap it up right here. Of course, tomorrow, Friday, we'll be replaying from the archives an episode of TechStrong TV. And we'll be back Monday with all new, fresh content, more information, more interviews. So have a great weekend. And until Monday, when I speak to you, live again, stay well, stay safe, stay strong, tech strong. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.